Chapter 2.
Oh, that's not really the 130.
Madam Clerk, is Mr. Zimmett online? He's what?
He needs to enable his video and audio. He's online. I see him online.
Could we bring him up on the screen? Oh, he has to turn on his video. Mr. Zimmett, if you can hear us, if you can enable your audio and video, please. Let's see if I do. Call Alan Zimmett. There he is.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Excuse me.
Here he's putting his ears in. Mr. Zimmett, can you hear us? I think you have to put your audio on, sir.
Derek, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, too.
Would the council like to take these one by
Yes,
one
sir.
and others?
And the first one we're going to do is agenda item number 75, file number E2022-8, Chapter 2.
Yes. So the council held at its meeting on December 1st had an initial reading of the ordinance that we had drafted related to the changes to section 2.02. The council requested some changes to the ordinance, which we have now made, and we're presenting this ordinance back to the council for first reading. Briefly, I'll go through the changes that were made as requested by council. In section 2.02, first we reinserted some language that allows a council member to run for a different district.
Excuse me 1 second. Councilman Goods,
He must identify himself for the record.
Oh,
would you please identify yourself and what the purpose is why you are here today?
Yes, I'm sorry. My name's Alan Zimmett. I'm an attorney with Brian Miller Olive. I've been retained by the city to assist in drafting the charter amendment ordinances requested by council. And I'm here to make a presentation on the 3 ordinances that are back for first reading, presenting charter changes to include the requested changes made by council at the December 1st meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason I asked that, I had never seen this gentleman before. Before we had another lady that was here presenting, so I think it was a valid question to ask for him to state his name for the record and who he is.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Councilman Goods. That's correct. He works with Jennifer Cowan, who is also with Brian Miller and Olive and presented the last time. So thank you. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Please
Thank you.
proceed.
Thank you. So the first ordinance has incorporated the changes that the council requested with regard to section 2.02 of the charter. We have reinserted the language that allows a council member to run for a different district after having served 2 consecutive terms in a council seat. We've added language that the council requested that puts a outside limit, total limit of 4 consecutive terms on any council member. That new language is underlined on page 2 of the new ordinance. Otherwise, we have revised the title of the ordinance to reflect what changes the council has requested with regard to section 2.02, and we revised the question to reflect what is actually now proposed, what are now the proposed amendments to section 2.02.
If I can, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zimmett, you provided the clean version. I have the red line, the underline and strike through for council. If they wish to have that distributed, I can distribute that to them if they need to see that. But when you're referring to page 2 in the underline, were you referring to what council was sent out originally?
Yes, underlined is the language starting with the provided however, without exception. That is new language that we've added since the December 1st meeting.
Any council members have any comments or any questions?
I guess I do if I may.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much. So can we get the simple, I guess, summary of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that a council member may not run for more than 4 terms in total throughout the life, or is it 4 consecutive terms? What is that, just for the sake of the public and myself?
It's 4 consecutive terms. So, for example, a council member can run in District 1 for 2 terms, then run in District 4, let's say, for another 2 terms, and they would have 4 consecutive terms, and they would be totaled out.
Okay.
If they sat out a term, then you would start over. So if you served 3 terms, sat out a term, then you would start.
And that's fine. And I would like to see more or stricter term limits, but I'm, again, this is fine. I'm fine with it. Lord knows I'm not going to send this thing back to the drawing board. Thank you, and thank you very much for your firm's hard work on this, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other council member? Councilman Carlson.
I thought we fixed the pronoun thing. Didn't we do that when we were on the Charter Review Commission?
I thought we did too,
Councilwoman Hurtak, you're recognized.
but it doesn't seem like any of these were fixed, so yes.
Right, none of the sections that we worked on were changed.
Ms. Zelman.
So we left that the same.
Just to clarify, Andrew is not the city attorney. I did go back and look after that question was raised.
And in fact, that was one of the charter amendments that passed in the last election. And apparently, no one ever went back and went through the charter and found all the pronouns. We've now started to undertake that project. And we also determined that because it already went to the voters and passed, we don't have to go back to the voters to make those changes. We can just do it by ordinance of council after we identify all the places in the charter that we have to change the pronouns. So we will be bringing that to you in the new year. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Ms. Selman, while you're up there, just because of that, is there a way, I think it would be great if we were able to, and I can make a motion for this, to go through and make sure that all 18 changes that we worked so hard on were actually implemented?
We did that, but we'll
Okay,
look
no,
at it again.
so
Yeah.
you did that when you were
Yeah.
looking at the pronouns?
We did that a while ago. I don't know why we didn't catch the pronoun one, to be honest, so we will go back and look at all of them again. So-
I appreciate that, thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. Selman, while you're there, does staff have, I'm sorry, does any other council person have any other comments or questions?
Just follow up,
Councilman Carlson, you're recognized.
just to follow up on that, shouldn't we fix it in this one then, since it's going to the voters, or is it too late to do that today?
I would think, I'll ask Mr. Zimmett for his opinion. I would think a change as minor as that could be fixed between first and second reading if it doesn't change the title of the ordinance.
Okay.
And we also, along those lines, realize that the ordinance needs to be in what we call legislative format, where you have the numbers on the side, so we were gonna do that between first and second reading anyway.
And just for anybody watching, I think all we're talking about is instead of saying he, we say he/she, because we have women also on city council. Thank you.
Or they.
Right.
Ms. Selman, anything else you would like to add, or is there anyone on staff that would like to add anything? No? What is the pleasure of council?
Move the ordinance.
We're gonna have to have it read. Councilwoman Hurtak, did you have your hand raised? Did you want to
Yeah,
read this?
I don't know, but then you said you'd move the ordinance. Would you like to read it? Would you like me to read it?
Either one of you, whichever is
All
gonna
right.
speak up first.
File E2022-8CH2. Orders being presented for first reading consideration. An orders relating to the government of the city of Tampa, Florida, submitting to the electors of the city a proposed amendment to the revised charter of the city of Tampa of 1975 as amended to amend section 2.02 to revising term limits of the city council members to limit the ability of members of city council to serve more than a total of 4 consecutive full terms effective with the city of Tampa election in 2027, providing effective date.
We have a motion made by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilman Vieira. Roll call vote.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Goods,
Yes.
Vieira,
Yes.
and Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
If I
Second
can.
reading.
If I can, I'm sorry to interrupt. If I can, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a suggestion to council, because this is very time-sensitive. I would ask that council consider setting this for the first set of items after public comment to be able to get it to the mayor in a timely fashion, because time would be of the essence.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
And would that be for the rest of the agenda items that we're hearing, 76 and 77?
Yes, as well as the ones that have already been set on first reading and are scheduled to come back along with these on January 5th.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Second reading and adoption will be held on January 5th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 76, file number E 2022-8, Chapter 2. Yes, sir, please
Thank you.
proceed.
Yes. Again, Alan Zimmerman from Brian Miller Olive. This is the ordinance calling for referendum election for the proposed changes to Section 5.01 of the city charter. These changes relate to the Citizens Review Board. The changes that we have made since you first saw this ordinance on December 1st were to reflect the motion that was passed by the city council to make the changes relating to the hiring of legal counsel on behalf of the Citizen Review Board. What the language now provides is that the Citizen Review Board would select the counsel, which would, the attorney would be funded by the city. And we deleted the reference to the Tampa Police Department that we had previously included at the end of the proposed new language that's going to be added to Section 5.01. We likewise have changed the title to reflect what now is being presented for revisions in Section 5.01, and we accordingly revised the referendum question that would be presented to the voters. Again, the main two changes are the Citizen Review Board would select the attorney, and inserting specific language that the city would pay for the attorney.
So moved. Second. Or you know what, I'm sorry, you know what, Councilwoman Hurtak, you wanted to.
No, go right
You
ahead.
sure? I just did it
Absolutely, no.
just to-
We just
I'll
have to
tell you
read
what,
the
I'll tell you what I'm
ordinance.
gonna do. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Councilwoman Hurtak, would you please read?
There you go.
Okay, there
Thank
you
you.
go.
Yes, sir.
Ordinance being presented for first reading consideration, an ordinance relating to the government of the city of Tampa, Florida, submitting to the electors of the city a proposed amendment to the revised charter of the city of Tampa of 1975 as amended to amend section 5.01 to provide for the Citizens Review Board to select legal counsel who is not a city employee to advise the Citizens Review Board with funding provided by the city, providing an effective date.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Vieira. Any further discussion? Does staff wish to make any, or legal wish to make any comments? Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Vieira.
Yes.
Maniscalco.
Yes.
Miranda. Hurtak.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Goode.
Yes.
And Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. Second reading and adoption will be held on January 5th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m.
Yes, sir. You got the third one in front of you.
Yes, thank you. Again, Alan Zimmett, Brian Miller Olive. This one's probably the simplest of the three. This one relates to the changes in section 10.10 that relate to the Charter Review Commission. The change that the council requested was instead of convening a Charter Review Advisory Commission every 7 years, it would be every 8 years. So we made that corresponding change, not only in the proposed changes to section 10.10 in the title and in the referendum question that would be proposed to the voters.
Is there any comments or any questions? Staff, do you have any comments or any questions? Thank you. What is the pleasure of council?
I'll read it.
Thank you. Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much. An ordinance being presented for first reading consideration, E 2022-8, Chapter 2, an ordinance relating to the government of the city of Tampa, Florida, submitting to the electors of the city a proposed amendment to the revised charter of the city of Tampa of 1975 as amended, to amend section 10.10 to correct a scrivener's error and to provide that commencing in 2025, a charter review advisory commission be established every 8 years instead of every 10 years, and legal counsel and a professional facilitator for the commission be hired with the city council approval, providing an effective date.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Vieira. Roll call vote.
Miranda. Hurtak.
Yes.
Carlson. Goode.
Yes.
Vieira.
Yes.
Maniscalco.
Yes.
And Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. Second reading and adoption will be held on January 5th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m.
Sir, I thank you for all your hard work in this, and thank you for your legal expertise in rewriting these things for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a good afternoon.
You too. Happy holidays.
You too.
We're going to go back to agenda item number 12, file number Pt.2
Good afternoon, City Council. Jean Duncan, Administrator for Infrastructure and Mobility. My staff report will consist of several slides, brief slides to share with you, and I thought it might be convenient if you have a paper copy of those, so I'd like to hand those out if that's okay. So we had a motion last month to bring back some additional information about our waste-to-energy facility on the planning behind that facility project that is currently underway. Some of the requests that were in the transcript behind the motion were for more information we put on our website, for timing information to be provided, cost information a little more pronounced, and a format that lists the assets that are being refurbished or replaced or retrofitted as part of this project. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Thought they were driving for me.
It's up in front of us.
Okay.
You have it now?
Yes, sorry about that. So just very quick, brief information about our industry standards. Typically, waste energy facilities are designed with a 20 to 30-year estimated operating life. Obviously, regular maintenance intervals are undertaken. Annual and periodic maintenance is conducted to make sure the critical systems are functioning. And as things get close to their useful life, there's identification of refurbishment needs that are planned for the facility. Approximately 1/3 of the city's facility is original from 1985, with the remaining portions were retrofitted in the year 2002. And this is typical for facilities of this type to be retrofitted and refurbished. For example, Palm Beach just renewed their system in 2011, a complete overhaul. Pinellas completed a major rehab in 2020, and Pasco and Miami are currently working on similar projects such as we're doing here in Tampa. Again, a little bit about the planning that goes behind this project and other projects that we'll be bringing before you that are associated with this facility. Again, and this information was provided to you through email, the documents that I'm referencing here, as well as put on our website, so that's available for the public if they're interested in looking at any of this. So we start out with our comprehensive plan, which is our blueprint for major policies related to waste energy protocols. Because we were in a situation of looking at taking over the existing facility from a failing contractor, we did a feasibility plan in 2018, and that really identified the state of the facility, what the shortcomings and needs were for this facility. So we wanted to have that information before we decided to take over the plant. That, of course, went along with a 30-year plan, which we do for every asset, a 30-year life cycle plan. We don't do a 30-year capital plan, but we do a life cycle plan. And so as part of that, again, we look at repairs and maintenance that need to be ongoing to maintain the useful life, equipment replacement that's needed, and refurbishment needs. So that was mapped out in addition to a master plan that was done in 2019, which outlined major specificity in terms of the asset conditions and needs and recommended actions that need to be taken. So that fed into the details of the capital improvement program, which was adopted in October this year, which identified specific projects and specific assets that we need to invest in to rehabilitate. Concurrent with this, we always do a 10-year projection to keep our eye on the funding as much as possible in concert with that 30-year outlook. So we keep doing that every year, adding that new 10th year to get a sense of costs in the future that we have to be accounting for. Again, all of this information is on the website for the public to share. We will put these slides on the website when we're done as well. So there's a request to add a different format of this information, referencing timing, which I took to be life cycle, and also when things are put into service. So we created this information, this slide, which identifies the major assets, not every single one, but the major assets that will need to be addressed in the project when they were placed into service. As you can see, they're pretty old, and I hate to say that 1985 is old, but, and then the estimated life cycle from, estimated life cycle from the investment that we make, how long of a lifespan that will be adding. Apologize, I didn't forward that slide. So again, in line with the capital program, in line with the 30-year plan, we map out a schedule of needs and projects. This is a little bit busy slide, but just for your reference, the top bar is the current project that we're underway with. We had the $17 million GMP a couple months ago. We've started on that work, which consists of design and initial vendor procurements. We will be coming back to you in the spring with the second GMP for the actual construction of all the facility components that we need to make. And that will include an outage of the facility, which right now we're targeting at the end of the year for about 60 days. Our goal is to do that before the holidays in December to minimize any inconvenience for our citizen or our staff. Again, our 5-year CIP was adopted in October. This is in the budget book that's been on the website. It is currently on the solid waste to energy website. We totaled the numbers at the bottom for more convenience to see what our estimated outlook is for costs. These are planning level numbers. As we all know with budgets, unfortunately in today's world, everything seems to get more expensive and go up in cost. But at least this gives us an order of magnitude. Again, we do a second 5-year projection to keep our eye on the ball of what's coming in the future. And just very quickly, for those of you that took the tour, we appreciate your time on that. I have a list, of course, that I just mentioned. Here's a visual of some of those items that will be refurbished or retrofitted. For example, the cooling tower that was built in 1985 definitely needs to be replaced. We have transformers built in 1985, definitely need to be replaced. And replacing of the refuse pit crane, the ash building needs to be repaired. So that's just a visual that goes with some of the items that are in this project that we're currently working on. And again, we're in the stage of working on this project. We did a consultant selection back in April and selected Charles Perry Partners, who we call CPPI, which is a BBE Prime with several sub-consultants and vendors on their team. We had the first guaranteed maximum price approved by council for $17 million back in August. We're working on those tasks now. And we'll be bringing a second GMP back in the spring. That is going to be a large number, which we expect. It could be in the $60 to $80 million range, but I don't want to put that in concrete because we don't have that GMP yet. Part of the pre-design work that's going on is to come up with the details that give us that number and that cost estimate. Just one other point I want to make. Item 47 on the consent agenda is an audit that we requested, knowing that we were transitioning this plant from corporate to municipal. We wanted to see what needed to be done to make sure we have new protocols going forward. So there were some tracking items, staffing items, and SOP items that need to be addressed. We're currently working on those items. And Dennis just has a couple money slides to share, so I will hand things over to Dennis.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, Council. Dennis Rajero, Chief Financial Officer. Moving into slide number 10. As we've shared before, I just want to reiterate that we have not obligated the city to any debt so far. Really, the only thing we've obligated the city to was that approximate $17 million equipment purchase or purchases back in August. On the second bullet item, you'll recall the reimbursement resolution for $220 million we also did in August. We did that for basically two reasons. The first, as you recently heard from our bond counsel, we did that to set ourselves up to get reimbursed from this debt service for any expenses we're making right now. As you heard bond counsel say, it's a very prudent, forward-looking action, and we thank our team for surfacing that. We also did that to satisfy council's continued desire to, as you all say, show us the whole picture, okay? Don't drib and drab your plans to us, no death by 1,000 cuts. So that was our intent. $220 million right now is our total debt service plan for all of the solid waste projects, not just the waste to energy plant. To that end, and the third bullet, we've recently initiated a rate study, which is going to lead to a feasibility study from a third-party consultant. This consultant has the skills, the expertise, the knowledge to do a very deep dive, not only into the solid waste to energy business, but do the market research, do the market comparisons. This is best practice to go outside to someone whose niche is this particular service. What will come from this? The feasibility study. It's basically what are the parameters that are going to be required for this project or these projects to go forward. As we've shared before, it will include some sort of rate increase recommendation. We just don't know what it's going to be yet until the feasibility study and rate study is complete. That's anticipated to be summer. It takes quite a bit of time to do this extensive extensive research that a $220 million plan warrants. The final bullet, of course, things are changing at a rapid pace these days. It's a very volatile environment. I don't need to tell you that, but it's worth reiterating. So we'll keep council, we'll keep the public abreast of any significant changes that we find along this journey. And here you are. These are the various times this year that we have surfaced this plan with council and with the public, not only the waste to energy plan, but the larger overall plan, again, with the intent of providing the whole picture to keep everybody abreast of what our plan is as we go through. From the budget presentation in August to the public hearings, that's where City Council approved these capital improvement projects as part of the 5-year CIP, to the October workshop. Of course, that's where council said, hey, you haven't given us enough detailed information to warrant us making this decision. It's one of the reasons we're here today with all of this information. Understood. And here is the itemization of the grand plan. You've seen this in a somewhat different format before. The item we're talking about today, the waste to energy facility, $82.4 million in anticipated debt service. The potential relocation of the Solid Waste Administration and fleet from Spruce Street. We'll bring this to you again. We'll bring a business case again, just as we've done with this, and we'll bring you business cases for the third item, those other solid waste projects, which include, for example, the truck wash facility renovations, the mixed waste processing, and the transfer station refurbishment. Again, this is the broad-based view of what we plan to do going forward with council's permission. And finally, the bottom bullet, because we are in such volatile economic times, and I don't anticipate it's going to get any less volatile anytime soon, we've thrown in a roughly 4% contingency. We want to make sure, again, that we capture every dime that's capable of being reimbursed back to us from any potential debt service council chooses to issue. That is the extent of my portion, and of course, we're here to answer any questions council has.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and as I mentioned in the past, the facility, after having taken a tour, and I believe everybody has here and they're familiar with it, is a very impressive facility, and seeing how everything works and the benefit to our city. 1985 was thrown out there. That's not old, because I was born in 1984 and I don't consider myself old. However, when it comes to this type of machinery and this type of structure, I think only one part is original and 2/3 have been retrofitted as of 20 years ago. However, it's now reaching the end of that lifespan. When you mention here, just for clarification, the Charles Perry Partners, Inc., BBE Prime, explain BBE Prime.
Charles Perry Partners is the lead consultant. Typically, when we procure projects through CCNA, there's a prime consultant that is the lead on the project. They generally get the most percentage of the work, and then they decide who is on their team and what percentages of the work they're going to dole out to their team members. They come in and present that to us. So that splitting of work is part of the decision, along with the team qualifications as well.
Okay, because it's, $220 million overall project is a lot of money, which means a lot of opportunity for a lot of people to get or earn work that could benefit them. Also, in regards to the guaranteed maximum price, you've already put that cushion, that contingency of $9.5 million, considering how volatile the market is in regards to supply and everything.
Yes.
There's wants and there's needs. This is something that is definitely a need, because if we don't make the investment in this type of facility and a turbine fails and we have to outsource our garbage, whatever it could be catastrophic, and it's going to cost us a fortune to do that in the meantime while things come up and running. Again, having visited the facility, you can see where there's a lot of patchwork, and we need replacement. And it's more complicated than that. Once you walk through, you see that it is an aging structure, And like anything, like a car or whatever it is, if you don't maintain it properly, you're gonna have a breakdown. And breakdowns are gonna cause whatever amount in expenses. So, you know, this is something that we have to be. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We have to be on top of it. I see the calendar here, the public hearings that we've had, and then the 5 and 10-year plan, as you've shown in the previous charts of what it's going to cost. But again, this is a necessary investment, and we have to be careful not to delay anything like this because, again, the results could be catastrophic if we're not on top of this type of maintenance and investment. Thank you.
Councilman Carlson.
Yes, and thank you all so much for doing this. And just for the record, this is, I think, the third time we've had this big discussion. The second time, there was a lot of discussion about whether we should do this or not, and I want to make sure everybody knows I never question whether we should do this. I want to look at what the Chief of Staff calls the business case. What are the alternatives? How much does it cost? And in particular, I want a transparency into the numbers. And you all have given, I want to thank you all, especially Ms. Duncan, you all have given us volumes of information. You know, I was frustrated last time because I asked things like, was there a feasibility study 2 years ago? And nobody could answer the question about whether we had done one or not. Since then, I want to reassure the public, we have that, and it's like 100 pages long. And we have all the other backup documents that have all the details, all the budgets. This, what you saw today, is just a summary of it, and this is the kind of format that I'm used to seeing in board presentations and others. I think it's clear, it gets to the point about what we need. And what I really wanted was just transparency into the numbers and make sure that that we understand that, but more importantly, the public understands what we can expect about this. Because if we talk about 17 million, but we have no idea what it's going to cost in the future, then it could cause confusion. And now we know, at least in the short term, somewhere between 62 million when I added up all the numbers, and I think you put 82 in for the bond plus 9.5 million. But it's good to, and that's only 5 years, but it's good to understand that versus a much bigger number that it could have been. And it's completely understandable that yes, facilities like this have a 20, 30-year lifespan. You all knew that it had some deferred maintenance, and so all of it's going to have to be replaced at some point. I simply wanted to know the cost of it. And so I want to let the public know all those documents are there. And you said, Ms. Duncan, you're going to put it on the website. And the original consultants report 2018, now this is not under Ms. Duncan, not under this mayor, but it's interesting. One of the items says, you know, how to correspond with each of the constituents. And in the primary constituents, the mayor is listed, but city council isn't. And it says the mayor is the primary decision maker on this, so we need to fully brief the mayor. And then later on in communication, it says we need to do a one-page briefer for the city council. And I don't know whether that came from the consultant or staff, but that's kind of what I experienced or felt like I experienced in the first couple conversations about this. We were talking a lot about whether we should do it or not instead of what the numbers are. And I just wanted to make sure the public understood that that we're paying attention to the numbers, we're asking about them. And look, if inflation comes in, some number goes up by 10 or 20%, I think everybody will understand that, but at least we have some context to understand it. I have two quick questions. One is, what capacity do we have still? If this thing on a very busy day, like just the day after Christmas or something, at full capacity, full tonnage that we're getting from the trucks, how much capacity is left?
So if I understand the question, capacity, if
How much more
how
garbage
much
can we
more
burn?
can we take?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'll ask one of our
Yes.
team members, Chuck Conklin or Michael Arcadis is here as well.
And then I have
as
one
the
follow-up
record.
to that.
They have more of the details handy, so. I'd
Could
like
you
to
maybe
get-
just, I don't know what your unit and measure is, but maybe in tonnage, what's the maximum that we burn in a day, and then what's the capacity beyond that, if any?
Yes, good afternoon, Council. Chuck Conklin, Director of Waste Energy. We are currently burning about 1,000 tons per day. The plant was designed for 1,000 tons a day. So one of the issues right now is that our efficiency is down. With these projects completed, we fully expect our efficiency to go up. We'll be able to burn more waste, a little more waste, and produce more electricity.
So my other
So
question.
we're at design right now.
Okay, I guess I have two more questions. In these refurbishments, is there any room for additional capacity or just efficiency?
There is. Over the years, the turbine generator has lost efficiency, so we're going to make a little more electricity. Also, when we refurbish this equipment, we'll be able to produce a little more steam and send more steam to the turbine generator. By producing more steam, we'll have to burn a little more waste. We don't know the exact numbers now, but we know we'll get an efficiency increase.
My last question, and this is maybe a big question for another day, but if I remember correctly, Hillsborough County is trying to site a new one of these. Would it ever make sense for us to take over theirs and make money on? I know right now we're net loss, but is there any efficiency by having more tonnage coming in that we would increase our revenues through selling the electricity? That makes sense to do that.
I think that is, from my perspective, that is a topic for another day.
I think I'd like to ask Michael Deloach to comment on that, at least from a broad response.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Michael Deloach. I work for Arcadis, a consulting engineer for solid waste and waste energy for a long time. So the facility did used to take some waste from Hillsborough County. After the Hillsborough County settlement agreement, there was a time that Hillsborough County would bring waste over when Falkenberg, their waste energy facility, was down, and as their capacity increased. As we got to capacity in previous years, they do not bring any waste here. Probably in the last 6 or 8 years, they have not brought any waste over.
As these things, like right now, if we're taking 1,000 tons, and I don't know what their need is, but let's say it's another 1,000, is there any efficiency or economies of scale where we'll make more money, we'll make a higher percentage than we are now? I think I don't remember exactly, it's about 50% or 40% that we have to subsidize it. If we took on more tonnage from somebody else, is there a possibility that we could get closer to breaking even? Or?
There are possibilities. Some of my other clients have taken in outside county waste and other if they have additional capacity available. The problem is at your facility, McCabe really does not have additional capacity available. You could put all of the waste that facility is capable of processing through that facility with what you already generate.
Do we have room? Could we expand on that site?
Not really, no. So the relocation of the Spruce Street Solid Waste Office is taking up most of the available real estate that is still remaining there on that site. There's not room to add an additional boiler or additional capacity.
Sorry, the last question. What do we do if we need 1,500 or 2,000 tons in the future?
So obviously this will be a policy decision that'll be discussed, both with Solid Waste Council and the Mayor's Office, but there are opportunities, and I believe there are already discussions with Hillsborough County that they've offered. If the city believes that you need additional capacity in the future, you can look at sort of piggybacking on the facilities that they're looking to build down in South County on the One Water campus. Obviously, that facility is years out from being built, and they're still in planning stages. So that's also a possibility long-term. There are other possibilities that solid waste is looking at for diversion techniques. When you talk about organics diversion, you talk about other pieces that they can pull out of the waste and not put to the waste energy facility. They lower the efficiency of the waste energy facility anyways. So I think they're looking at other recyclables and organics diversion to sort of reduce the total volume, and I think that's your best bet.
Just a final comment on the water issue. The city pushes to control have our own facilities that we control. And on this issue, we're talking about maybe outsourcing the county. It seems to me in this particular issue, it might be better to look at expanding our existing plan. Conversation for another day. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Thank you, Councilman Carlson. You got to a lot of the points, and actually, diversion is it's a huge issue for me. We put way too much garbage in our waste to energy plant, and we really need to divert a lot of that. I've had some conversations with Director Washington already on that, and so I would like to continue that so that we could take in more garbage from other places if we're not producing so much. One of the questions I did want to ask, though, is when we're looking at this required rate study, or to determine the required rates to support this future debt, Are we looking at the cost? I would like included in that figure the cost if we didn't do anything, because it's going to be it's going to be a change, and people may say, oh, we don't want that. But I also want people to understand what would happen if the boilers shut down.
Understood.
What would, and we understand that the cost would include trucks going to Hillsborough County. If Hillsborough County would take our trash, the cost of them accepting our trash, the cost of overtime, just the costs. Because doing nothing, as other council members have said, doesn't seem like an option. We really need to replace this, but what would that cost be to ratepayers if we just didn't do anything? Because I have a feeling it wouldn't be nothing. So we need to share that so that when we're looking at it, we look at the broad picture. And I agree. I think the idea of expansion is very interesting. I'm concerned with the population that goes up in this city and the rapid, how we're building, how many people are moving to Tampa, and how many businesses. This isn't just residential, this is commercial garbage as well. And what do we do when we've maxed capacity for this if we're already at capacity? So we absolutely have got to start talking about diversion of waste. Of course, the mayor just sent me to Copenhagen a month ago to take a look at their biogas plant, which is the diversion of food waste, which was really amazing, something definitely worth looking into. The city of Orlando is putting a plant in, and I think we should really keep our eye on that and see how in the future we could possibly do something similar to help divert more waste. Thank you.
Anyone else? What is the percentage of refuge that we are taking in from outside entities and burning at this facility?
I'll ask Chuck Conklin to answer that more specifically.
Again, Chuck Conklin, Waste Energy Director. It's very small at this point. We do take some special handling waste, which is assured destruction waste for businesses and other locations, but we try not to take waste in the amounts that would force us to divert into diversion of city waste.
In that, and I don't know if this is proper phrase, but are we charging market rate?
We
should, okay, let me add on top, should we be charging more?
We are currently talking about that right now. Larry and I have had several discussions on special handling that comes into the facility and what rates we should be charging.
Because
so we're looking at that, sir.
If we're taking, no pun intended, but if we're taking trash from somebody, we better be charging for it.
Yes, sir.
Because if we're not burning our own or don't have the ability to burn our own, we should be sending them somewhere else or charging them a heck of a lot more. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions?
We appreciate the opportunity to come back with more detail, and we will keep doing our best to give as much detail and ahead of time information is requested. We appreciate your support with this project.
Councilman Carlson, does this satisfy your?
Yes, and I just want to say again, thank you to you and your team. This is an excellent job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Council.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 13, file number CM 22-78934.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Maniscalco.
So I have spoken with Mr. B-Day. He's asked for a continuance on this till January 5th. However, I've been in contact with some members of the community. This is regarding Trader Joe's on Southdale Mabry. I'm sure we've all seen it and heard complaints as to the positioning of the property, the parking lot, the size of the parking lot, and how that traffic pours out into the streets and causes a gridlock. Mr. B-Day asked for a continuance to January 5th just to better access the situation and provide more information to the public. But I want the public to know that I did bring this up. I have spoken with Mr. B-Day. I have responded to constituent concerns regarding this. This was something that Trader Joe's was implemented. This project was approved before, most of us were here, but the property is in an interesting position. It doesn't have access to Del Mabry. It goes out to one of the side streets, but in that, it affects the neighborhood because it's 2 lanes, there's a turning lane, a turning area there on Del Mabry. But that was it. I just want the public to know that I'm on top of this. I have spoken with Mr. Bede, and the continuance is requested to January 5th just for more information. So that's it.
Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor? Any opposed? Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the same thing. It's hard to see where the dividing line is between his district and my district, and so I've gotten a lot of complaints about this too. Just one question, maybe there's nobody here to answer this, but has there been any permit change or physical change? Anybody know any physical change to the layout of Trader Joe's in the last year?
I think I don't think there's anybody
Afternoon,
here.
Chair,
Vic?
if I may.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Vic Bede, Director, Mobility Department. I'm also joined by Abby Feely. But to answer your question, Councilman, the previous property had a similar use to the current Trader Joe's in that they're both zoned commercial general. And previously it used to be a gym. Now it's a grocery store, of course. So in essence, Trader Joe's moved into the existing structure with an existing use for city code.
But just that happened, I think, a long time ago, as Councilman Maniscalco said. But has anything changed in the last 6 months to a year? I wonder. There have been a lot of complaints about this intersection for a long time, but did something suddenly change in the last year?
Nothing has changed that we're aware of in terms of the street and the roadway capacity or operations. What does happen is, sorry, Ms. Feely, did you have a?
No, that's okay. I just wanted to confirm that there had not been any modifications to the structure or any expansion or modification to the square footage of the structure either.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's no further questions? Thank you both. I'm sorry, Mr. Bede, you're going to be on number 14, file number E2022-8, chapter 27. I'm sorry. Yeah. I remember that you're here now. Thank you, Mr. Benson.
Thank you. And I do have some visuals for you. I think that'll be the fastest way to provide this report. If I can get that up here. Onto the
They're trying. It's coming up.
There we go. Thank you.
It's there.
This is an update on the West Tampa overlay. I was asked to attend some of the West Tampa CAC meetings and work with them to develop some changes based upon a series of design exceptions that were requested and granted by City Council. Just to provide a very, very brief overview, the desired development pattern of West Tampa in the overlay, this is an example of a structure from the 1920s, a single-family detached. This is the desired development pattern that the overlay is seeking to achieve. The front porch, the pedestrian orientation. There is a driveway, you'll notice. There is not necessarily a restricted access from the alley in the original development pattern for the area. This is an example of the desired development pattern that the overlay is trying to achieve. This example is specific to a location that does actually have an alley that's being used for access, and there are examples of infill development that is able to orient towards the alley and use the alley consistent with the development pattern that the overlay is trying to achieve. Right, let me see if I can zoom out here. As far as some of the newer construction that's coming in that is triggering this issue related to alley access, again, the desired development pattern for a standard size lot for single-family detached, this is sort of the newer version of what we're seeing of development that's complying with the overlay. The issue that has been raised that I think many of us are aware of is the presence of the alley. Just because the alley is there does not mean that it's actually navigable, or it doesn't mean that it's actually in condition to be used for development. And the code currently requires that development improve the alley and make that investment, which is something that can be overly burdensome for a single family developer when we're trying to provide more housing options in a manner that's as affordable as possible. This is the desired development pattern without the alley. So there is a way to orient these single-family detached structures where the garages are provided for in the back and where you're not creating unnecessary conflicts with pedestrians by providing wide driveways that aren't consistent with that desired development pattern that the overlay is trying to achieve. Unfortunately, what we're seeing come in are some of these examples where that garage is pulled up closer to the street, and a double car driveway is being put in. And this is happening in locations with an alley, but also locations without an alley. So it is related to the alley issue, but it's not really necessary to address the alley issue to address this. So the recommendation that was brought forward from the CAC was twofold. The first is to require this condition to seek a design exception. So this would still be allowed, but you'd have to go through the design exception process to do the double car driveway and do the garage in the front if that's what you really want to do. If your lot is wide, so if it's 70 feet wide or greater, there is a demonstrated development pattern. We do have homes in West Tampa that are on wide lots that have a double car driveway. That would be permitted. Here's an example of a newer project that was on a wide lot that deserved, for lack of a better word, the double car driveway. But in the areas with the narrow lots, the proliferation of driveways is really eroding the desired development pattern of the overlay. And so this text amendment would do just that. It would require that narrow lots get a single car driveway. If you want a double car driveway, you seek a design exception. It's similar to what's happening with the alleys right now. Now to address the alleys, that's the second recommendation. The CRA, I believe staff did bring forward the alleyway study. We're going to be looking at the design standards for alleys. We're going to be looking at a more cost-effective solution so that we're not requiring single-family home builders to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars rebuilding our alley system. And we're also going to look at what alleys are the most important to the CAC members that we can maybe look at costing out and prioritizing for future capital projects, developing a long-term plan to rehabilitate these alleys. Because right now there isn't a funding source, as you know. The sales tax for transportation did not pass, and so we really have to prioritize what's the most important if this is something that is really part of the future vision of West Tampa. So this is just a staff report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before I go to Councilman Miranda, this overlay is not only in the CRA zone, but it's also in other parts of West Tampa?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilman Miranda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benson.
Yes, sir.
The principles that you brought up is telling me, and I've been a resident of West Tampa since 1961, really, 62, is that there is no pattern in West Tampa. What you've shown us here is a big houses with a big two-car garage in the back or whatever. And those are the new ones that are being renewed. They're being put up now because the lot at West Tampa used to cost $10,000, $12,000. Now $250,000. So you can't build a little puny house with a bicycle rack and say, here's where I'm going to live, because the lot's worth more than the house. So what you do is you built this, and you have to make the payment on something about $650,000 to $750,000. And if I repeat that, people are going to say he's nuts. So I'm not going to repeat it. But what you've seen there, what I've seen with my own eyes, is that West Tampa, there is no one area that is alike. There are and I agree with you, there's houses that face half a block on one side and half a block on the other side because they're only half a block. They want a complete block on both sides where you have a house back to back. That doesn't exist there. You also have lots that are 35 foot wide. You also have lots that are 150 foot wide. You have a mishmash of whatever you want. And in fact, on Palmetto and Glen, not too many years ago, I had 12 racehorses there. They're no longer there, there's houses. And there's a lot of things going on where I live at now. There was never an alley. I would imagine maybe in way past that, there was an alley, but when all of us bought the houses there for $12,400, there was no alley. So I don't know exactly how you're going to, because one block, you go one block, you got one thing. If you drive 4 or 5 blocks, you see 2 alleys that you can't go through, and you see one alley, well, maybe you can go through it, but it's a mishmash of all of it. So I don't know how you're going to work through this and say, this is what I want, when the residents there, where they live at, their culture is there, they've been there for 20 or 30. West Tampa doesn't move that much. So they've been there for 30 or 40 years and say, we don't want that. I don't know what's going to happen.
And that did come up in the discussions with the CAC. Some of the members live in the original part of West Tampa where the lots are narrow, you have the historic curbs and the brick streets. But the Armory Garden section, there's no curb, the streets are wider, the lots are huge. How do you treat them all the same? And
Well,
that's,
because Army Garden's a different area. It was a much, and I hate to say this about, it was a little higher aloft in price when we were kids. Now, they're still higher, because you go buy an Army Gardens now, you're looking at something that sells for a lot of money, maybe close to $1 million. And these are the things that you have to understand, not you, but the whole committee or whatever is looking at it, that it's very different. Everybody's happy right now, so let's see what happens when you start the fires.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Pence.
thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Agenda item number 15, file number CM 22-78784. Dennis.
Yes. Good afternoon, council. I'm just waiting on PowerPoint presentation to pull up. Kayon Henderson, manager for the Housing and Community Development Division. I will be going over shortly our recommendations from our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, also known as our AHAC. So I'll go a little bit over what the AHAC background is, why they are made up, how we work together, the incentives update that we have, some recommendations, as well as just what we're looking for in the future to make sure that we stay on target. So the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, the AHAC committee, we have to have a committee pursuant to the SHIP funds that we receive. Those are the state funds, which is our state housing initiative partnership funds. And so we're required to have the committee and meet once a month to go over what that looks like as far as any future development, as well as the committee has to vote on any SHIP funds that we would utilize. And so they are responsible as a group to recommend any actions, any initiatives, really to encourage and help us to facilitate affordable housing while protecting realistically with the ability and the property to appreciate in value. So it was through our AHAC committee that we were able to come up with our infill phase 1 and phase 2 program, as well as our replacement program. So just kind of the importance of what they play in making sure that we're able to create new programs. And so sometimes the recommendations are to look at what our existing policies and procedures are, any regulations, helping us to maybe modify what we have as we continue, any creation of exceptions that will be applicable to affordable housing. So making sure that not only do we think outside of the box, but they bring new ideas to us to help us to kind of move that needle also. And then also helping us to adopt any new policies. We'll bring those policies and procedures before the AHAC committee so that they can review them as well as vote on them to help us to move forward. So we look at the inventory of affordable housing. I mean, we know that right now, being in a housing crisis, we don't have enough inventory. So again, really why this important committee comes together every month. And so we do assess what the property assets we have for longer term vision, what the strategy might be like, whether or not we continue to look at single family or we're looking at various projects. Once we do that, the staff does provide the list of the city-owned properties, and we are going to continue doing that to our AHAC committee just to make sure that they see the list that we have. And then they also make recommendations for development, whether or not we should look at, again, single-family attached, or we're just looking at single-family projects. And then they help to create and maintain inventory of any of the city-owned properties for development of future affordable housing that we're looking at. So for the AHAC committee, as well as some of these incentives that we have to then provide to the state, it's very specific in what we have to review annually. So we go before our committee and give the different incentives and strategies that we have to look at per the state. And then together we talk through how we can make some of these possible. The accelerated permitting, you know, that's one that we continue to strive and continue to do better with. Again, it was through our AHAT meetings where it was suggested that we kind of had a dedicated person. We did our infill phase 2 program, and I'm happy to say through these conversations, the fastest permit we had was in and out in 5 days. Looking at fee waivers, whether that's water and wastewater capacity fee waiver, and evaluating what that potential impact fee deferment would look like. Density bonus, we're proud to say, again, we come together and figure out how do we make those deals move forward. And so we've had, in the past year, we've had some density bonus agreements that we were able to come together and again, pitch these ideas through our committee, looking at any fee waivers. Again, the water and wastewater capacity fee waiver, and we look at those as we're looking at all new projects, and as long as they're earmarked for affordable housing. Accessory dwelling units, this is one that was definitely workshopped before, and so we're letting the state know that while we have not made any move from last year to this year, because we committed to looking at this as a new strategy or a new incentive, that we're continuing to evaluate them, that they have been workshopped to City Council, and so we'll continue to look at how we can move the mark on that and get that going. Reducing parking and setback requirements. Yesterday we had our AHAC meeting, and we talked about continually looking at how we reduce parking ratios for affordable housing instead of utilizing that space that's really not being used for parking anyway. The policies, procedures, and ordinances, as we have new programs and we're looking whether or not we're going to put a land use restriction or we're putting a mortgage, we go before the committee to make sure that we are able to get the best use of the funds or the best use of the development that we have. And so just reviewing that and looking at all the land development, the zoning code changes also prior to it coming before City Council. And then looking at all suitable land, as I mentioned earlier, that we'll have to AHAC biannually so that they can look at what we have inventory-wise, and that will come from our real estate department. Any questions?
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just thinking outside the box, and you spoke about accessory dwellings. Have you or your staff or anyone made a strategic study of how many lots fit into where you could put another building in the back? And if that's a fact, do you have to rezone that property because they're all RS50?
We have not looked. I don't know if Abby is on. I know she did come into a workshop. Housing has not looked at what the inventory would be.
So I guess you would have to do that, see how many would fit. And then parking is another issue, and I'd like to take you and your staff on an evening ride with me to beautiful West Tampa to see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I really want to do that to show you something.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
From my understanding at yesterday's AHAC meeting, one of the things we talked about was the housing study, and we are currently doing that to find out what we have and what we're looking for. And do you have a projected date that you may, like a month possibly that might be done, maybe?
For the housing needs assessment?
Yes.
I definitely think it's going to be a few months, not like another month. We are asking for some information a little bit earlier so that we can start to assess as we have new programs coming out, and so we're earmarking to get some of that statistics a little bit earlier.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councilman Goods.
I guess the bigger picture for me is we talk about real estate. Looking at properties within this city that are abandoned. I see so many churches that are huge and dilapidated buildings that are just sitting rotting. We should be inventorying the city to see how we can capture those properties to look at attainable housing. The market is not going to drop down, to change. The market is here now. So I guess my thing is, how do we capture that portion? That's what we need to capture, things that are dilapidated, things that are just sitting in this city rotting. We should be buying, trying to ease the pain of some of our citizens who, are being forced out. So I'm hoping a portion of that study or study be done to deal with that issue. And to me, to gear up real estate to really be looking in that direction. So I'm hoping in the near future, Ms. Travis ran now, so she probably already saying, I've got that handled, Councilman Goulds, already. So I'm just hoping, because I hear so many developers and just every citizen talk about, and not saying our employees aren't working hard in real estate, but they're just saying that it seems like we're not 2 steps ahead, we're like 4 steps back. So maybe just, I don't know. Do you have an answer for me?
Yes, I do. Nicole Travis, Administrative Development and Economic Opportunity. And so, as we've talked about before, housing affordability and the housing crisis that we're in right now is not a silver bullet solution, right? And so We work closely with the AHAC advisory committee to come up with different types of strategies and incentives, but it's also coupled with our housing needs assessment that's taking place, us being strategically aggressive with property acquisition. You just recently approved another $20.2 million as a CRA board, and that money in the districts that are in our central area, West and East Tampa, honestly have the most affordable land that we should be strategically trying to buy. We will do that now that we have more funds to do that. We will be working with our real estate team to do that, and also coming forward with the CRA. At our next meeting, I'm supposed to be talking to you about staffing and some restructuring. It's also to put together a project management team that could also help identify some of these strategic opportunities. I don't believe in purchasing property where the private sector is already going. I think that redevelopment money should be spent to spur private investment or go where private investment is not going. And then lastly, to Councilman Miranda's point about smaller lot size and properties, you'll see that come back to you in January. I'm sorry. You'll see the smaller lot sizes and whether houses or different unit types can fit on those smaller properties. You'll see that come back to you in January when Mr. Drumgo brings to you the assessment of CRA properties. That's going through all city-owned properties and CRA-owned properties, and then it'll come back to you as city-owned properties. So we're mapping those things as well, working closely with the land development coordination team to see what's available land and probably make some recommendations to you for reducing minimum lot sizes for different housing types. So it's a holistic approach and not just one.
Now, is real estate in its own department, or I always envision, I think real estate should be with housing. So is that in a total different portfolio there? Or?
It's a different department. So the one thing about our real estate department is the real estate department is an internal service similar to HR, IT, that supports all departments, that supports stormwater, that supports transportation when there's easements or acquisitions taking place, when we're doing culverts or some kind of infrastructure item. So the real estate department is a department within my portfolio, but it services all departments across the entire city. So it's not placed just in the housing team. The idea of building up a project management team and a more specialized team to focus on housing is so that we can aggressively go out and find these strategic opportunities that we can go and make place contracts on properties for acquisition. And that's also, like, if we aggressively start to buy property for acquisition, one of the things that we're trying to bring to you is the development of our community land trust. And this is how you start to talk about housing in perpetuity being affordable to the residents of Tampa, is securing that affordability piece by purchasing these properties, putting them in a community land trust, that way that it's protected, the affordability is protected long-term. So all of that, these are all things that you are working on, and you've heard them multiple times, but we're aggressively trying to.
So basically putting a real estate person actually with housing, or project management housing, so they can deal with that and not worry about housing, having so many responsibilities all over the city. Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're hearing me say that we're adding staff to the team to be able to work on all these different approaches, not just in real estate, from strategic acquisitions, but sometimes it's partnerships on how you structure real estate deals. So it's a different skill type than just transactional real estate.
Well, I know you know how to work a deal. I know you know how to work a deal.
Yes, sir.
I've seen you work.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I thank you for that question, because I've had several members of the community asking me about why our real estate department doesn't go off after things more aggressively, and so thank you for that answer. The only other thing I would say on this in terms of the AHAC committee is that we just talked about taking out our monthly numbers and going to quarterly so that we have more time to have these discussions. And I think it would be wonderful to actually go to the AHAC committee with like a question of the month. Okay. Like what kinds of, what exactly I mean, I love the slides that say we want to ask about this and that, so maybe even just tailor a question to the committee to put out ahead of time so people can come with more ideas in their heads. and use that team. They expressed yesterday how much they really want to help with all the expertise they have, and I know they will come up with great ideas, and we appreciate all the work that you all do to put into that committee. So,
Thank you.
Any other further comments or questions? Councilman Carlson.
On the idea of the community land trust and buying more land, is there a market timing issue? Just based on watching Zillow, my house and ones around me have gone down 10 or 15% last year after going up double. I think most people are expecting a recession next year and that the land prices are going to go down more. Is it possible to, I know that this may be partly a CRA question, but to bank cash and then when the market goes down to buy the land?
Yeah, that's a good point, Councilman Carlson. So the idea right now is to stand up the CLT so that you have the board and the infrastructure there to take place. You also have larger pieces of property right now that we're working on with developers, and there's a possibility of developing those properties with it being in the land trust. Our strategic acquisition of buying up properties, ideally, yes, we would wait for the market to come down and only do strategic acquisitions if somebody was trying to unload property and we wanted to seize that opportunity. Yes, but as far as single parcels, we probably would wait, bank the cash and wait just for strategic opportunities. But right now, what's critical and that will be before you in the next couple of months is really standing up the CLT to make sure that the infrastructure is there so that when we do have the opportunities, you can start putting the things in the CLT. The other thing with the CLT is that you don't have to have just ownership. There could be rental CLTs. There could also be commercial uses in the CLT as well. And so we were just recently in New York doing a deep dive in all of the housing options to help us and what we can do to make the CLT sustainable long-term housing affordability is what we're focusing on in the next couple of months. And so you should see that soon. Mr. Drumbo should be bringing that back to you soon.
Councilwoman Hurtak, do you satisfy your
yes, thank you.
Agenda item number 18, CM 22-77457.
All right. Afternoon, Council. Carl Brody from the Legal Department. The reason I'm here is to just address the memo that I provided you. There was a request by Council that Legal Department consider drafting up an ordinance that would prohibit parking, holding events, and storing items on cemetery property. The memo responds with concerns that anytime government takes action, which has the effect of limiting a private property owner's use of their property, then that action is protected by both the U.S. Constitution, State of Florida Constitution, and also by Florida State Statute, the Burt-Harris Act. Specifically, and particularly for the statutory reference, the Burt-Harris Act says that any time a government act has the effect of burdening a private property, that what's called a takings occurs, which means that the government would have to pay or reimburse the private property owner the cost of the legislation or other act that's limiting their use of their property. That's the concern, the primary concern raised here. We can work through some of the issues with the specifics of how you would create a parking ordinance that limits parking, how you would limit storing of items, because some of these are common aspects of cemeteries. There is parking on cemeteries. There are items that are stored on cemeteries, and there are events that are held at cemeteries. So we'd have to work through some of that also. But the primary concern is we don't want to put ourselves in a position of being liable for actually subjecting the city to liability for a takings in a scenario where we are limiting the use of property by a private property owner. And of course, cemeteries are private property. The way the ordinance was requested to be drafted would include all cemeteries. So it would include both public cemeteries, which we can regulate because they're public cemeteries, and it would include private cemeteries, which subjects us to the concern that was raised in the memo. Let me just, one last thing. You know, this is a concern, and it's a concern that's really nationwide. Cities locally and around the country have done studies, and they found that we do have a problem just nationwide with African-American cemeteries being lost or abandoned and then subsequently sold, and private property owners taking ownership of that and then doing what they would with that property, be it building a corporate center, be it building a school, be it building another cemetery on top of the lost cemetery. So it's an issue that is known. It's an issue that's trying to be addressed, and the best route we believe toward addressing it here in the city is not through an ordinance. It's through taking other action, and we can talk about that after I hear a little more from you and your concerns.
Councilman Carlson.
I have two questions. One, is it possible just to regulate not parking on top of known graves versus a cemetery?
And that brings up a good question, and the issue is that for some of these, or for our specific issue here, we're talking about African-American cemeteries that have been lost, they've been sold away to a private property owner. So that private property owner receives that bundle of rights once they own the property, which includes being able to, if they want to, build a parking lot on top of the lost cemetery. Similarly, would be no different than if a private property owner built a skyscraper on top of the same type of property. So no, we can't, well, if we did, we would be subjecting ourselves to the specific takings concern.
So what about if we build it into land use? So if maybe we can find a solution retroactively, but we've seen examples where the city gets stuck with these things eventually when they're sold out. If somebody came to us today and wanted to build a cemetery, at some point in the future they would sell out and they might not have a revenue stream, and then they would dump it on the city, and the city would be maybe liable to keep it up. And so, understanding that the kind of business of cemeteries, and that they're necessary, but they may also revert to the city at some point. Isn't there a way that we could put something into the land use code to say if you want to go to a cemetery category that you have to agree at that time that you wouldn't that the entitlement of the land going forward, if they opt in, would not allow. So this is not taking away anybody's rights. They would have to opt into it, but it would say in the entitlement that they couldn't park on cemetery.
Right. Let me interrupt just quickly, because I'm not sure Carl is as familiar with Chapter 497 as I and others here have become, which is the state statute that governs cemeteries. The state has a very aggressive regulatory scheme for cemeteries now. And it does require a trust fund be set up where a certain percentage of the money that the cemetery owner receives for operating the cemetery is placed in a state trust fund to operate the cemetery if they abandon it or if they.
But on the trust fund, like I talked to Gina about it, it's not very much money, right? It's like $100,000, which is maybe enough.
But the issue becomes because the state regulates current cemeteries so pervasively in 497, there could be preemption issues with us trying to regulate cemeteries similarly. We'd have to look at that. There may be some opportunity, but we'd have to be careful how we did that. And that would be the one thing. I think what Carl's trying to address is the forgotten or abandoned cemeteries which have been reused and are now being discovered at this point in time, which is a different matter altogether, so.
Correct. And that is a good transition to one of the issues I wanted to address, and I think the state might be attempting to address this.
Councilman Carlson, are you finished? Thank you very much. Councilman Good, you're recognized.
We're talking two different issues here. We're talking private property owner versus state law that regulates cemeteries. There are two distinct things, and there are rules and regulations that deal strictly with cemeteries. So yes, you have property rights when you're talking about maybe property, but when you're talking about a cemetery, there are laws and rules and regulations that regulate, no matter if it's a private cemetery or a public cemetery. There are rules and regulations that stipulate certain things for cemetery grounds. And all I'm saying, and I was asking for, was that when I look at 30th and Sly Avenue, and I have construction equipment on those type of properties, that's an issue. I don't know if that property is private property or city, but there's a city sign that says, you know, a cemetery or whatever on that property. So I think what the concern is for the community is not to take away anybody's property or cause harm, but to have a conversation in reference to, because I know, because I go in on Saturday of the week with my family and drive on roads that are built inside of cemeteries. Now, when you drive inside a cemetery, most cars line up on that road, folks get out. It's very rarely that folks will park their cars actually on anybody's grave or anything like that. So I think the question has become to make sure that parking isn't on any graves. Not necessarily that, you know, having events in a cemetery. People have birthdays and come in there and have events in cemeteries. That is a normal activity. Someone passes away, we want to go, have balloons, but whatever. Some cemeteries don't allow you to appraise certain things inside of the cemetery for cleaner measures and what have you. But no one's talking about not being able to be in a cemetery to do certain activities. The issue is being in a cemetery and making sure that people aren't parked on a grave. That's what I think the premise of this whole thing is about. Not about anybody's personal property rights or what have you, but there are cemetery rules. So I need to ask, have we looked at the cemetery rules versus just private property? That's my concern.
We have. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Council. Toyinina Hargret, also with the City Attorney's Office. I want to just point out some of the reasons why this conversation is so complex. I have been attending all of the meetings related to Zion, and I am on the city's cemetery task force, so I know just enough to be dangerous. There's a lot of things here that interact with each other. Of course, under Florida statute, there's Chapter 497, and that deals with the regulation of cemeteries. We've also got another statute, 872, that deals with criminal aspects related to interfering with interred remains and that sort of a thing. What you are talking about, Councilman Goods, related to being able to drive is captured in 497, I believe, and that allows for an easement for cemeteries so that you can drive. And
Correct.
That's typically the way that people will use a cemetery, which is that you will drive along the easement so as not to drive on top of the interred remains. But that same issue is confused, or it can be conflated with the fact that we have known abandoned. So there's different categories. Cemeteries that are known, that are being regulated by the state, there are known abandoned, and there are unknown or suspected abandoned. Many of you might have heard in the paper about the possibility that there's some homes that are in East Tampa that may have for 60 or 65 years been built on top of graves. And that is unfortunate, but there's housing, plumbing, utilities that are on those properties, and those individuals are parking on their property. The fact that they are parking on their property, any type of regulation that we would install for the city or initiate by the city would also affect those individuals. So that's why we're trying to separate those different issues and come to you with a way that we can achieve what you want. But at this moment, the way that the motion was phrased, it simply would result in a taking. And that's something that the city wouldn't want to necessarily just jump into.
So what I would suggest, and I hear all your points, and they're very well taken, and you're right. I'm glad someone knows about Chapter 497. because there are different laws and rules, and there are regulations. So what I would say, I think there's a conversation. And when you have these issues, have a conversation with these folks. And now we can talk about, is there an easement that can be put in some of these places if there's an issue about top of grades? Well, you don't know, because you don't want to go just tearing up the cemeteries.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you, because you don't want, those are sacred places. And I think some of the people, the citizens who were talking about these type of things feel some type of way. But I think we need to have, and I thought Ms. Wynn had a task force or somebody
Yes.
in the city. So I would suggest, if that's the case, let's get the task force up and running again, and make sure we've got it moving, and then talk with those issues that are now have arisen right now, and now we said we can work those with a conversation and try to work those out.
Well, I'm proud to tell you that that task force is still meeting regularly, and we discuss all of these issues as they interrelate. So we are still meeting on them. But I also want to let you know that while the city has its internal task force to try to understand the issues that we have here in Tampa, there's also the state task force that was initiated, and they are also trying to figure out the different ways in which they can assist from the state standpoint with where private property and public property rights or public interest might intersect.
But I do think we got to especially look at the 30th and Sly. That bothers me all the time when you have all that stuff. And I don't know if some of the cemeteries, some of it was a piece of property, I don't know. But people have complained about that for years, so I really don't know. And then you've got the College Hill thing that has arisen again recently this week in a couple of weeks. I think maybe the task force needs to reach out to those individuals that are complaining or making complaints, and then also to the property owners to have a conversation to work this out and make sure that everything's on the up and up, and that way everybody can, really honor the dead who's there in those cemeteries.
Councilman Goods, it's my promise to you that we will place that on our next agenda. It will be discussed on our next agenda.
That's all I can ask.
30th and Sly, you've got it.
And again, I know the College Hill thing is coming up. It's come up again in the paper. The news media's been out there, and I also meet with those folks to see what's going on, and the Italian Club folks, because they have issues. But we don't want infighting of communities. We want to be able to work together as a community. And nobody, the Italian Club, anybody, they don't want anybody parking on anybody's grave either. They was nice people. I know them. So let's just see if we can work together and just come to a good solution if we can.
Yes, sir. We will raise the matter.
Thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Brody, for all your work on this. Councilman Goots touched on it. I'm glad he did the College Hill Cemetery issue. I think it'd be smart if you would be willing, sir, to maybe make a motion to have it come back to us in 4 or 5 months. Yeah, and one thing, there's a number of issues there. Some allegations have been made, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just good to get the whole picture using the city talent, resources, et cetera. Something was posed, I think it was in the media, on whether or not if there was going to be, I think a scan was done 20 years ago. I don't want to misspeak. If I'm incorrect, I apologize for that. But I believe there was a scan done about 20 years ago or so, and whether or not there should be an updated scan with updated technology, et cetera. Number one, my position has always been, if the city, if it ultimately comes down, it would be something that would be in the public interest, where the city can devote reasonable dollars to that. And there may be people who would do it for free, by the way. Because it is in the public interest and whatnot. So I do think that should come back to us and whatnot, including the feasibility of if it comes up in dialogue. I know that Miss Angela Alderman has been out there beating that drum, and she got the historical marker up there, and I salute her for that. She's a very good woman and whatnot. And like Councilman Good said, all the players at the table are very decent people, and it's just a matter of just making sure. And that's all, because people bring up some good issues that I certainly think we ought to look at. So if you make that motion, sir, I'd be delighted to second it and support it.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilman Goods.
Mr. Brody, what time you and your folks need? How many months you need? How many days you need?
I would think, 6 months would be?
We meet once in
Right, how long to come back?
4 or 5 months.
4 or 5 months? Okay, 4 or 5 months.
I'm gonna give you 4. I ain't gonna give you 5. I'm gonna give you 4. I'm gonna give you 4. How about that?
April 20th.
April 20. All right.
Second.
That will give you time to talk with all parties involved, those different organizations, whatever, and like Mr. Vieira said, if something needs to be done, we do it.
Can you
All
just
right?
clarify what
Yes.
specifically is being
Can you
asked
state
for?
the
All
motion,
right,
please?
let's have a motion to come back 4 months, April 20th, making sure we've had a discussion with all parties as it relates to College Hill and the Italian Club. If anything we can assist with, let's do that if we can with all parties. And update, and also update on the 30th Street and Sly.
If I can. Mr.
Mr.
Gooch,
Shelby.
how is that, and now, in relation specifically to cemeteries, or how would you want that phrased in the motion to appear on the agenda?
A cemetery review report, I mean,
A review on,
review on both those items.
do you have that, Madam Clerk, the cemetery? Thank you.
That's good enough, Mr. Burke?
A review of cemetery items.
Yeah, items for 30th and Sly, and the College Hill situation that has arisen again, to make sure we're all together, and, you know, everyone's good people. Let's just get together and make sure whatever we can do, we move on.
Yeah, to address pending cemetery issues on 30th and Sly and
College Hill.
discussions up with
College Hill, the
College
Italian
Hill.
Club, and those individuals who've come out in reference to it.
If I may, sir, and I wanted to make sure that motion included, because I believe you made reference to this, sir, and I don't want to misspeak. If there is a need that is found, and again, I don't know the technology, the methodology, et cetera, for an updated scan, whether somebody would do it for free. Again, if it is private property, we can't compel ourselves on there, et cetera. But if either somebody would do it for free or feasibility with public dollars, whatever it may be, was that in it? Okay, yes, sir, thank you.
So feasibility of a scan of the property, and specifically the College Hill property. Okay.
And that would have all been in discussion, you know, that's why I said make sure we discuss it, you know, with those folks.
Correct.
All right?
Very good.
Councilman Goods, are you finished?
Yes, sir, I'm finished.
Thank you very much. Councilman Maniscalco, we still have a motion on the floor. Councilman Maniscalco.
And I'm happy to support the motion. I think it's a good idea. I will tell you, because it's, you know, April's a ways away, but back at the end of 2019, I met with a gentleman who was the architect for the mausoleum that's right next to this parcel, the College Hill Cemetery. And a long time family friend. He passed away in February of 2020, so I can't ask him any more questions. But when I went to see him, he specifically brought up the cemetery. I was going to see him just as a friend, but, you know, this is a story that's been brewing for a long time. But he had assured me that they had done ground penetration, and I think the Italian Club may have found the documents. Since the stories come out, they've looked for them, and that there were no graves there. When they built that mausoleum, which is right there, the way he would design is the foundation, the steel, everything, he would go deep into the ground, so they would have found something. He said they did not find anything. That may be true, and I believe him. I don't know if those graves were relocated, and where were they relocated to? Because right next to the cemetery is a retention pond. And then next to this empty parking lot is the Armwood family. They're graves, but the Armwood family is there, Blanche Armwood, the namesake of the school. So I don't know. I mean, I believe the gentleman because he was very instrumental in restoring that cemetery and all the work that he did over the last few decades. But he assured me, and I think it tells it in the story with the Times, that ground penetrating radar, or whatever the proper nomenclature is, that no graves were there. So we'll see. I look forward to the report. This is what I heard firsthand from the gentleman there that was very instrumental in it. Again, he's passed away, so I can only tell you what I recall, but he assured me that there were no graves. However, I will look forward to the report, and we'll do what we can from there. Thank you.
We have a motion made by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilman Vieira. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Council members, we are on agenda 19. Let's please be mindful that we have a 5:01 meeting. It is 3 o'clock now.
Move to approve item number 19.
So move.
Is that good? She's good.
Motion to approve File number E 2022-48 by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? We are now at agenda item number 22, file number E 2022-8, Chapter 2.
Hello. Ursula Richardson with the Assistant City Attorney, Ursula Richardson with the City Attorney's Office. This item is bringing back an ordinance for you that you all asked for back on, I believe it was November 3rd. Essentially, the language that has been included in the ordinance that's before you, believe meets all of the objectives that you were asking for. You wanted a specific limited delegation of authority to the City Attorney's Office and or the Risk Manager's Office in order to resolve claims and lawsuits. You wanted to supersede a memorandum by former City Attorney Salvatore Torito. That is included in this ordinance. You wanted a correction for the language that was left out of the 2006 ordinance that never made it to Muni Code. That was brought up and discussed, and so there is specific language saying that was included. It never made it, but it would be struck from this current ordinance. And then review. You asked that this come back before your council every 5 years for review, not just for economic purposes, but it would also give you the opportunity to see how the ordinance is working. We've included a limit on that limited authority for the City Attorney's Office to settle anything that's not greater than $100,000. And then a limited authority for the Risk Management Office to also settle claims and lawsuits not more than $30,000. And essentially, unless you all have any questions for me, this is our presentation of what we have for you, and we believe it meets all of the objectives of your motion.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to you and Ms. Zellman and anybody else who worked on this. It's exactly what we requested. So unless anybody else has any other comments, I'm happy to make a motion.
Is there any other comments or questions? Councilwoman Hurtak.
And I also want to echo that. It was exactly what we asked for when I read the resolution or the ordinance rather. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Councilman Carlson, would you please read the ordinance?
I'd like to move item number 22, file number E2022-8, CH2, ordinance being presented for first reading consideration, ordinance of the City of Tampa, Florida, amending section 2-233 of the City of Tampa Code to revise the authority of the city attorney and or their designee and their risk manager and or their designee to dispose of claims and lawsuits against the city, providing for severability, repealing all ordinances or other documents in conflict herewith, providing an effective date.
We have we have a motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilwoman Hurtak. Let's have a roll call on this.
Hurtak.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Goods.
Yes.
Vieira.
Yes.
Maniscalco.
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
And Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously. Second reading and adoption will be held on January 5th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m.
Thank you very much. Councilman Vieira, you've got public safety.
Yeah, you got it, 23 through 27, I hear by second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilman Goods, you have Parks and Recreation.
Move 28 to 29.
We have a motion made by Councilman Goods, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Councilwoman Hurtak.
I move items number 30 through 40.
You have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Getting there. Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, sir. I move items 41 through 44, 45, and 46. Support done, and 47.
We have a motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me. Any opposed? Thank you. Councilman Carlson, you've got building and zoning.
Yes, sir. I'm going to, in abundance of caution, recuse myself on number 48, which I'll explain in a second, but I'd first like to make a motion for items 49 through 58.
Second.
A motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
And I'd like to file Form 8B. My firm may have a client related to this item, and I haven't been able to get an official opinion, but in abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself. And please
Motion
find
to
it.
receive and file, seconded by Councilman Vieira. All in favor?
And if I may, I move, I'm sorry, the item.
Second.
48.
Wait till at least he leaves chambers.
Oh,
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilman Maniscalco. I'm sorry. Yes, Councilman Maniscalco.
I move items 59 through 70.
Second. We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Can we have,
Move to open the public hearing.
thank you.
Second.
A motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
We have agenda item number 71, file number BF 22-78440.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Council. McLean Evans, Assistant City Attorney. Item number 71 is the second public hearing on a brownfield designation for Coral Walk located at 1000 West Fig Street. An application has been submitted to the City of Tampa requesting a designation of this property as a brownfield site to assist with the assessment and remediation of environmental impacts that may exist on the property. Details of the designation have been outlined in a document entitled Staff Report on Coral Walk Brownfield Designation, which is available for public review at the clerk's office. City staff has determined that all statutory and public notice requirements have been met and recommend council approve this designation. At the conclusion of this second public hearing, council will have an opportunity to pass a resolution designating Coral Walk as a brownfield area as specified under Chapter 376 Florida statutes. Staff and I are available if you have any questions.
Is there any comments or any questions? Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak to agenda item number 71, file number BF 22-78440?
second.
We have a motion to move the resolution by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Thank you.
Move to close the public hearing.
Agenda item number 7.
Move to close.
Motion to close public hearing, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. Agenda item number 72, file number AB 2-22-19. Anybody giving any type of testimony at this time, please stand to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Chairman, if I may be heard, Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. It turns out that site plans, hard copy site plans relating to this item, AB 2-22-19, were delivered to City Council's offices. I'm putting them on the dais if anybody needs them for access. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Agenda item
afternoon,
number
Chairman
72,
Cedro.
AB-2. I'm Ms. LaShawna Dock. Thank you very much for being here. And you were sworn in?
Yes, I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Cedro and council members, LaShawn Dock, Development Coordination. And item 72 is AB 2-2219. This is for the property located at 450 Channelside Drive. This item is before you today for second reading and adoption. This is a special use 2 alcoholic beverage sales request for a large venue, consumption on premise only. So there were modifications required to be made to the site plan. The applicant has made those modifications. The site plan has been certified by the zoning administrator and provided to the clerk. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Any questions for staff? Petitioner.
Good afternoon, Julie Mandel, law firm of Gray Robinson, 401 East Jackson Street. I am available for any questions. We did make all the revisions as we discussed at the first reading and are happy to see your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hurtak.
I just wanted to state for the record that I have reviewed all of the information on this meeting and I'm prepared to vote since I was absent.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience and chambers that wishes to speak to this? Thank you very much.
Move to close. Second.
Motion to close by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor? Councilman Miranda, would you please read this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. File number AB2/22-19. Ordinance being presented for second reading adoption. Ordinance approving a special use permit SU2 for alcohol beverage sales, laws venue, consumption on premise only, and making lawful to sell beverages regardless of alcohol content, beer, wine, and liquor at or from that certain lot, plot, or tract of land located at 450 Channelside Drive, as more particularly described in Section 3, providing for all that all ordinance or parts of ordinance in conflict are repealed, repealing ordinance number 2014-91, preventing an effective date.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Place your votes and record.
Motion carried with Carlson voting no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, council.
Where am I at now? Goodness me. All these pages are backwards. Agenda item number 73, file number VAC 22-14.
Ross Amos Development Coordination, presenting file number VAC 22-14. This is being presented for second reading and adoption of proposed vacating request to vacate an alley lying north of Stroud Avenue, south of Chicago Avenue, east of Carolina Avenue, and west of Moody Avenue. I'm available if you have any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, petitioner.
Good afternoon, Council. Steve Michelini representing the petitioner. This issue has been fully vetted. I know we spent a great deal of time on this before. The city has found that there's no public purpose for this particular alley. The previous properties were split on the north side, which eliminated their use and any rights to use the alley. So the only people that have the rights for access are on Stroud. We prepared a separate private title policy. We had one prepared which was submitted to the city to verify that, so that it was a third party and not us verifying that. There's no operational use. The staff report indicated that they had no objections and that there were reservations of easements across that, which we are fine with. There were no other objections. There was some discussion about EMS access, which never would have occurred and could not occur in this alley. So I'll be happy to answer any more questions you might have, and we respectfully request your approval.
Is there any comments or any questions from council? Councilwoman Hurtak.
I also just wanted to say again that I was not here for the first vote, but I have I reviewed this and I'm ready.
Is there anyone in chambers that wishes to speak to this? Please remember when you start to speak, state your name and whether or not you've been sworn in.
Thank you.
And if I can, Mr. Chairman, before we go any further, what I would like to ask council is to receive and file any ex parte communications which have been available to the public and made part of the record, please, by a motion to receive and file.
That's so moved.
Thank you.
We have a motion made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
I have one question, Chairman. I think that because it was a 4 vote, that Councilman Maniscalco may need to return to chambers.
Do we take a 5-minute break?
We're missing one.
Oh, here he is, right here. Here, take it.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
I need this on.
Is the Elmo on, please?
You know, there were, excuse me, there were only 7 copies, is that right? 8 copies. Do you have an extra copy or you don't? I'm sorry, you don't? Ma'am, do you have?
Thank you.
We're
You
good.
do?
We're
Okay,
good.
Good.
Can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Are you ready? My name is Kim Price. I'm at 2410 West Chicago Avenue. There's a number of irrelevant as well as false facts that have been presented. It's frustrating to hear this and not be able to question for clarity, but the continuance that was requested was supposed to bring testimony from city employees about what's been done. We came to the city asking for help and guidance to access our property almost 2 years ago, and the staff conducted a meeting a year ago, August, at which time the petitioner purchased the property with the intent to vacate the alley, which is information the city knew but did not share. And coincidentally, all communication with me at that time ceased. And it wasn't until the last hearing that Keith O'Connor admitted at that time that he knew that this was in the works and then decided to wait it out, figuring the problem would go away. I think the petitioner has confused the Chicago Stroud Alley with the Chicago Mississippi Alley, which you can see on here. This is the Mississippi Alley where C.B. Shaw ends. I went down to Lucky Wade. He gave me this survey. This is where C.B. Shaw ends. C.B. Shaw has nothing to do with ours. We never gave up our rights. We have not abandoned it. We were not stripped of it. And this is where it ends. This is our alley. There's a 12-foot entrance. There's a 15-foot exit. There's entry and there's egress. So Mr. Michelini talked of this title company. He said it again. I don't see proof of it. There's no evidence of it. It's not in your box anywhere that we have given up and are stripped of our rights on it. Historically, when a vacated alley is divided, half of each neighbor gets this. This cannot happen until the city makes good on its notices to me last July when it said they would be sending out notices for all of the encroachments. The structures need to be removed so that if in fact this vacation does occur, we're at least able to get our 6 feet. But first you have to say no, because with the vacated alley, that's not gonna happen. So there's 20 departments that don't care, but there are 12 families that do care. So your criteria for vacating the alley is fourfold. You think that they met all of it. They meet none of it. We meet all of it. There's no public money or taxes maintaining it. There's not a high crime area, so criminal activity being curtailed is not a problem. The developer is not trying to foster redevelopment. He's trying to make $1 million, and our abutting properties will be completely cut off. In conclusion, the city admitted they don't have the resources to prioritize caring for the alley. We didn't ask you to care for the alley, only to use your survey to enforce the violations. We're not asking to park back there. We simply feel that we need and deserve access, and I've requested this for 2 years. Does anybody have any questions?
Councilman Goods.
I don't have any questions for her, but I do have questions for staff. Ross?
Just to clarify, I'd like to go over.
Yeah, I want you to clarify
the plat.
What the plat, what she's submitted
Yes.
to us.
I don't know if you've seen that.
Huh?
I don't know if you've seen
All right,
that.
you know, that's why I want to talk about that. I mean,
This is the original C.B. Shaw plat she mentioned, and within the survey that Mr. Lucky Wade survey he created. So I'm gonna kind of overlay.
Shirley's gonna bring you what she brought us so you can see what she's talking about.
Sure, and I have it on hand too as well. This is just a copy of what Lucky Wade created. It's what she's shown here, and I'm going to show you, she has C.B. Shaw of what Lucky Wade was showing her what the boundaries of that plat is. So currently, this was the original plat, C.B. Shaw's. So when Chicago Avenue was replatted for those townhomes, the legal description on the townhome replat is a replat of lots 5 through 10 inclusive of block 1. Block 1, C.B. Shaw's, 5 through 10. So that includes this north boundary of 5 through 10. Are you following? Okay. This is C.B. Shaw's, a subdivision of block 8 of Holden subdivision. A map or plat thereof recorded in plat book 4, page 59 of the Hillsborough County Public Records. And lots 1 through 8 inclusive, and the west 25 feet of lot 14 of block 2. So 1 through 8 of block 2 and the west 25 feet of lot 14 here. And this was, and I can show the replat is here. So the north boundary here of lot 5 through 10 is here. This Mississippi is on the north side of their townhome. We're talking about the alley on the south side is what we're talking about vacating. This Mississippi alley was previously vacated in the past. So I'm not sure exactly what the question is, to be honest with you.
I'm totally confused.
We're not here to talk about the Mississippi alleyway, or the street to the north. We're talking about the alley to the south here. This is a replat. This is Chicago Avenue sub. We're talking about the alley to the south. And I can show you again Lucky Wade's survey of what he created. So this section here is the south half of that subdivision, the Chicago Avenue subdivision. This is Chicago Avenue here. Again, to the south of Chicago Avenue subdivision plat. This north section of this alley that's proposed to be vacated is the south boundary of the Chicago Avenue subdivision here. And I can show you the copy of what she had and highlighted. This is just a zoomed in portion of the alley to the south of Chicago Avenue subdivision is here. Again, she's correct with the dimensions, 15 and 12. And again, this is just a zoomed in section. This is 10-foot alley. This is to the north. This is the one we're focusing on for the vacating is this image here, not this.
Councilman Miranda.
I'm just trying to find Mr. Good's here in the conversation we're having. If I remember looking at this alley, whichever, I guess you're saying it's the one in the bottom.
Correct.
Did they have already dwellings or some dwellings that went into the 6 foot of the alley?
Dwellings?
Dwellings,
the
whether
encroachments?
it's a building
the
or whatever.
That's why this survey was created, to see exactly what was within the alley encroaching.
So then we have an alley that's impassable but not closed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilman Hurtak.
Can you please put up the one you had on before this? What's the deal with the alley in the middle?
This?
Yeah, no, right there. You said that there was, yeah, right there where your finger is.
This is a drainage easement.
Ah,
This
okay.
this was the 25 feet that the replat called out.
Okay.
And that was specifically a drainage easement.
Okay, that's what I was
track.
confused about, because I thought that was alley, it's
Yeah,
drainage
and
easement,
you
okay.
can see, if you have the documents on hand, it specifically says permanent drainage easement by
Yes, okay.
plat 3.
Thank you.
Councilman Carlson.
Considering that staff just answered questions, I would like to hear the member of the public's response to that and any other insights as a neighbor.
For me?
Yes.
So the north side of that alley that he was talking about, north side, that was vacated, and they did give up those rights. It's a horrible situation, and certainly nothing to do with this, but it is definitely was given up. They lost those rights. The developer gave it up. It went to the commercial property to the north of us. We fought that last year at the convention center, but to no avail. But they have no rights and they have no alley back there, which is what C.B. Shaw did at that section, and it ended here, okay? This has nothing to do with C.B. Shaw on this bottom. We are 100% within our rights to either take our 6 feet or we'll take the whole alley. We don't care, we'll take care of it. But we can't, regardless of whether or not, there are dimensions on here that show you where the structures are. The reason it's impassable is because there are encroachments. The reason they can't get through it is because people have built on it. 2 years I've been asking them to cite it. I've been asking them to get rid of it. Nothing. And I'm told at the last meeting from Kevin O'Connor that it's because, well, we knew a vacation was coming, so we figured we'd just let it go and see what happened, which apparently is pretty normal. But right now, everything in there is encroached. So they're saying, keep it. But that is the only thing that CB Shaw, and they did get rid of it. They did lose their rights to it. We did not, and we have not given them up, and I have seen no evidence of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this from the public?
Bridget Mace, 2420 West Chicago Avenue. Good afternoon. I submitted documents for your review of my testimony regarding prior comments. I appreciate you evaluating those in your decision. However, there are 4 criteria that the city has outlined for you to consider. 1, will the vacating alleviate a public nuisance or curtail criminal activity? The answer is no. This is not a zip code with high crime stats. The consideration of crime rate and public nuisance has no substantial impact. Number 2, will the vacating foster redevelopment? No, John Lum of Tampa Bay Developers does not have plans to solve the housing crisis or dramatically improve the community. John Lum of Tampa Bay Developers purchased this home on Stroud in September of 2021, which is 6 months after our initial complaint with the city. He is planning to build a couple townhomes to convert his $500,000 investment into $1 to $2 million, which generates financial wealth for this one individual. Has he submitted a copy of these plans, and do you believe that fosters redevelopment? Do you believe that the spirit of this law and the definition of redevelopment is for one individual to make millions despite the detriment, expense, and hardship on the 21 families that live in this neighborhood? Number 3, and will an abutting property owner's access to their property be completely cut off or diminished? Yes. Chicago Avenue owners' rear access will be permanently removed if you vacate this alley. It violates our property rights and forces a civil suit. We are entitled to at least 6 foot of use regardless of how wide or the method, and it's not accessible to us now. Number 4, will the vacating alleviate or relieve the public from the cost of maintaining it? No. There is no public relief from the cost of maintaining this right-of-way. As previously acknowledged, tax-paying citizens did not contribute to any maintenance of the alley. There is no evidence of that provided through testimony or a budget or invoices of any sort. We approached the city in February of 2021 to solve for our property access issue since we couldn't force the abutting residents to follow city code. This petition was filed in March of 2022, which was over 6 months and a year later. After 6 months of the purchase and a year later, if we knew the path to solve for our access prior to this petition, we would have gladly petitioned to care for the alley. Our challenge was the encroachments, and with all due respect, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it not the role of code enforcement to enforce compliance, or is it the job of the taxpaying citizens? We would and will gladly care for the 6 foot, but we felt neighborhood was responsible to enforce first. In conclusion, the 4 criteria validates why you should vote no. We ask this of you and request code enforcement to perform their duties. The burden should not be on the 21 families to enforce city rules and regulations. And I don't think you want to be the first city council to grant an entire 12-foot alley to the abutting residents. That is not probably the precedence that you want to set. As residents, we expect the city to uphold their rules and regulations, which is reasonable. TPD doesn't selectively cite expired meters or ignore people, and why should neighborhood enhancement? Thank you. Let me know
Thank you.
if you have any questions.
Councilman Goods.
Mr. Wigginton, I have several issues with this case, sir. I'm going to be frank with you. It seems like some of the issues that the city, we dropped the ball on some issues, sir.
Pardon me, one moment, please. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I have the documents necessary. Could you repeat your question, please?
It seems to me that somehow we dropped some of the ball on this issue with these folks. That's number 1. Number 2 is, it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse here. And to me, it seems like this is more of a civil issue right now that should be going before some type of judge or probate to deal with those issues first before even coming this body here just about closing an alley for some type of zoning hearing. So I just think that we're putting ourselves, this council, at a liability situation right now, because this seems like this to be a community civil issue first that they need to determine about this CB Shaw situation, who owns the property, who the property has been given, whatever, before we even get involved in talking about closing an alleyway. I just believe that maybe legal needs to look at this again before we even make a vote on this situation. I believe we're putting the cart before the horse what relates to Mr. Michelini and his client and the citizens who live over there, because you've got 12 citizens who say they don't want it closed, they live there, and I believe that we need to look at this a little bit more and don't put this council in this position right now. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Oh.
Yes,
Sorry?
please.
Was I supposed to respond? There's questions, I imagine?
I was just asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir. So as far as getting the cart before the horse, this is like peeling away the layers of an onion. And really the first layer, the outside layer, is the alleyway, the right-of-way. And that's what the application is to vacate. Once that alleyway, if it is vacated, then it gets down to who owns the property, whether it gets divided down the middle or whether one person owns it entirely. But you really can't address that issue until the vacating has been resolved. So that's why, again, the vacating is the outside of the layer, and then once you remove that, then it is a civil matter as to who owns the fee of the alleyway.
I respect your opinion, sir, but I think we're still putting the cart before the horse. I think it needs to be in reverse, where you say peeling this onion to where you have the judge sitting and says who does what, who owns what, and then we can come back and see in reference to the vacant. And that's just my
and I respect that, and I completely understand that, but really, we're not gonna be in a position to go before a judge. What we would be is in front of a magistrate on a code enforcement issue, and then once the magistrate learns about a vacating application, they're gonna hold that case in abeyance until the vacating is resolved, because if it is resolved, then there may or may not be an encroachment into an alleyway any longer. And so that's why they would hold back to wait for the vacating to occur. And if and when it does occur, that is.
Okay. Mr. Shelby.
Well, with that being the case, the answer is to then hear the evidence, allow Mr. Michelini to rebut, and then council can choose what it wishes to do. If you want to, and I suggest that what Mr. Wigginton says is true, that if it does go forward, you cannot hold something in abeyance until something is resolved civilly, because that is a whole process that is outside the purview of this council. What you can do is you can act on the petition, which has been filed, and you do base your decision on the competent substantial evidence that you find during your hearing. And that is what Mr. Michelini and his client are here asking you to do. And from what I understand, is that the code enforcement action is held in abeyance pending the resolution of city council's action.
That generally is the course of action that a magistrate takes. Now, I'm sure there are exceptions, but generally speaking, that is correct.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
But what I want to know is if they put their issue for code enforcement in a year and a half before they decided to ask for the vacation of the alley, that's why these people are, excuse my French, but pissed. Because nothing happened for a year and a half when they asked for something to happen, and now all of a sudden, they have a vacation. What happened is the city didn't do their job to actually deal with the alley issue. If they came to you for a year and a half and didn't get it solved, and then all of a sudden we only started to pay attention when there was a vacation, that is not okay. That's the part that I understand that they're really angry about, and they should be. We didn't deal with the problem, and if there hadn't been a vacation, I guess we still wouldn't be dealing with the problem. But we have to deal with just the fact that luckily we had a vacation here. It doesn't smell right. And I mean, that may be the situation we're in now, but I just don't see how we can vacate something without having a resolution here.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, my feelings are the same on that just as it pertains to staff and the order of things. Can we, three quick questions. Can we confirm that the code enforcement complaint was made prior to the filing of this?
I'm sorry, I don't represent the code enforcement board, so my involvement with those communications have been very limited. I've asked Sophia to come up and maybe address that
And the
question.
second thing, from a legal point of view, wouldn't if there's, it seems to me that if there's a filing for code enforcement, that would be resolved first. Why was that suddenly bumped? And my third question, I'll go ahead and ask it, is that the member of the public testified that Mr. O'Connor last time said that he knew that this vacation was coming. How did he know the vacation was coming before it was filed?
Lucia Wayne, Administrative Neighborhood and Community Affairs. I'm sorry, Councilman Carlson. Would you repeat your question?
The first question was, do you know, can you confirm that the code enforcement filing predated the filing of this application?
I'm not sure if there was, no, I cannot answer that unequivocally, that the code enforcement filing predated the filing of the vacating.
And so,
Because, and the reason why I can't answer the code enforcement filing, Councilman Carlson, because it was my understanding that the code, because we could not get in to the code, to the areas to assess any code issues because of the areas were not accessible. If that answers your question or not.
and then, but then if there was a code, let's assume that it's correct that the code enforcement filing happened before this, back to legal, would it seems like that would take precedent over something that happened subsequently, no?
Well, again, I'm
How is that?
presuming that the code enforcement was brought in because of the fact that there were.
I'm talking
that
to
there-
Councilman Goods.
I'm sorry. That code enforcement was brought in because there was an encroachment into the alleyway. And then, so I would imagine at some point in time, code enforcement became aware that there was gonna be an application to vacate the alleyway, which could certainly impact.
There's something in our code that says that an application to vacate an alley takes precedent over a code enforcement violation.
If the attention for the code enforcement is the encroachment into the alleyway, and then there is an application to vacate the alleyway, then yes, the vacation would solve the encroachment into the alleyway.
Yeah, but not solved, but is there a legal, is there something legally that says one happens before the other?
No, sir, there's nothing that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So then it seems like they're in the wrong order. The last thing is if somebody tells staff that there's going to be an application before they file an application, why would someone stop a code enforcement process before that happened?
So Nicole Travis, Administrative Development and Economic Opportunity. Generally, when you have code issues, you try to get the properties into compliance. This process is a remedy for those encroachments. This is this process that we're going through right now, the vacation would remedy that situation. And so for all our code violation cases, it's not to be punitive, we try to get compliance. This is just one of the processes. This vacating process would bring the properties into compliance should the vacating move forward. So this process would remedy the encroachment issue.
But it seems like if that took precedent over the other one, that the other adjoining property owners would have some rights there instead of.
So we try to get the property, we try to remedy the situation before you start taking there was a case that was open. When you say that they're going to remedy it, you go through the vacating process. That is an avenue to bring the properties into compliance. And so that's what this application is, in trying to remedy the situation. If it's not granted, then we would have to go back.
Councilman Goods.
That ain't my issue. My issue is simple, Mr. Carlson, is if you recall, we had this go back the first time because code enforcement was not here, if I'm not mistaken. Then code enforcement came back with the gentleman who was the actual officer who was dealing with the complaint, and Mr. O'Connor was here. And the guy did not tell a lie to us. He told us the truth. And he sit there, and Mr. O'Connor sit there, and both of them said that they stopped this process because they believe, or was told with other city departments, that they would wait to do this and that. And that's in the record. So, and also, the gentleman said he had been trying to deal with that for a while and was told to back off of it. So that's not true. So to say for what Ms. Herchick is saying, you are correct. This has been handled a long time ago, but they backed off the process for whatever reason.
Because you tried to remedy the situation. This process is a remedy to the encroachment
But that's not what I'm
situation.
saying, Ms. Travis. What I'm saying is when Mr. O'Connor and the other gentleman was here, It wasn't about rimming the process or whatever. They said they wanted to take it because they knew it was gonna go to a vacating. That's what was said. That's what was said.
I'd like to make a comment on, as far as the timing. Any of you all can go out in an alley and look and see things. You may think that's an alley and you'll see things there. You don't know what's there and what's encroaching in an alley. So at that point, when they made the complaint, nobody knows what's in the alley. That's why when they called my group, Ms. Barbara Lynch spoke with, I think, one of the ladies here tonight. And the topic came up and she said, we can't tell you what's in the alley or where that alley's at until there's a survey completed. At that time, code enforcement can't make the actual citation because they need to have our city surveyor go out there and make the survey. So this survey, I was looking just to kind of give you a timeline. This survey looks like it was completed. The field survey was completed in June 8th of 2021. That's just the data in the field. That's the last time he was in the field to collect his data and then bring it back into the office and do the sketch and the legal description. So that just to give you a heads up on the timeline of why some sort of time was lapsed of why the citation wasn't followed up. That's why.
But Ross, I'm still confused with this whole process.
And again, I can't speak for code enforcement.
Right, so you're telling me now, I mean, I'm the police officer a long time. And if somebody got a code violation, going back and forth, and code will go knock on that door and say, we got a violation, and most people are compliant to say, okay, here, I'm guilty, whatever. So for to say that code can't get back there to do their job, I'm sorry. I ain't buying that one because I've been a police a long time when I've had to call code enforcement situation and they go knock right on the door with the policeman or whatever and have access to whatever you need to get access to. So something ain't smelling right here. I don't know what it is, but it don't sound right to me. I'm sorry.
And again, just to confirm that, if they did come, say it was my place, knocking on my door, and they say, we need to go in your backyard and look to see if you've made any code violations. I'm going to let them back there, and they're going to not have any property line or anything to look at or know what they're looking at. So that's kind of why they turned to us and said, hey, we need to get this done and see what's out there. Anyway.
Mr. Shelby.
Just a reminder,
Mr. Miranda, then Councilwoman Hurtak, and I've got a couple questions.
And I'm not, I don't want to impede that. I just want to let council know that there's one other person that wishes to speak, it looks like.
I see Ms. Pointer back there.
But I just want to be conscious I want council just to be conscious of the fact that please wait until you hear all the testimony and then ask your questions. No, let me rephrase that. Council, why don't you govern your hearing as the way you see fit, but just a reminder that don't make any conclusions until you hear all the evidence. Thank you.
I yield until we hear all the evidence.
Councilwoman Hurtak?
That's fine.
Ms. Pointer,
Oh, is it my turn? Okay.
please, if you would approach the podium, you have 3 minutes.
I'd like to point out to you that on any alley in the city of Tampa, if you are walking down the alleyway and you run into a fence, you don't have to have a survey to know there's a violation. I just want to start with that. Because if you run into a fence as you walk down the alleyway, you obviously know that there's an encroachment. And honestly, I think the city has failed the citizens. Mr. Lum, when he purchased that property, knew that there was an issue. Mr. Lum also knows how to work the system. These ladies over here and the other 10 homeowners on the north side don't know how to work the system. My computer was screwed up during that last hearing, so I didn't get to speak. But it was extremely obvious. These ladies have documentation that they filed thing after thing after thing with the city. Months and months before that. Did anybody from code enforcement tell those ladies, you know what? You guys should go and file to vacate the alleyway. I would be willing to let a whole lot of money, almost as much as it's going to cost us for Pure, that nobody ever told those ladies they could do that. How would they know unless somebody told them? When I had a problem with an alleyway behind my house, they said, you should get it vacated. I'm like, okay. So it cost me $573. I would argue that somebody in neighborhood enforcement should have A, done their job, and you can call downstairs to Murray Holmes and she should be able to pull the system, pull the reports. How is it that the city has failed to follow up on the things that they were supposed to do? Code enforcement has a job. And Mr. O'Connor stood up here and said, I knew that there was a vacation coming. How? Where's the registered lobbyist meeting? Where is the registered lobbyist meeting? If somebody said, we're going to file this, where is the registered lobbyist meeting? Keep digging. There are people who know the rules in this situation, and it's not these ladies over here. There are people who know how to work the system in this city, and it's not these ladies over here. It's your job to protect them.
Madam Clerk, do we have all 5 people online? Excuse me, all 4. I see Ms. Pointer was going to speak online. I do see Ms. Brewster and Ms. Carol Ann Bennett on the line. Do we have the others?
Chair, no, they are the only ones logged on at this time.
Ms. Brewster and Ms. Bennett, would you please raise your right hands to be sworn in?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Ms. Brewster, would you please proceed?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, I'm Laura Brewster. I live at 2412 West Chicago. I don't really have too much more to add to this situation, but I just, I'm more concerned about the safety issue because we don't have side access. So if there was ever a fire in the front of the house, my son is in the back, like just being able to get out the back. Because if we allow the people behind us to do whatever they want, then they could build like a cement wall behind us and there's nothing we can do. So just being able to have, you know, not necessarily a paved road, but some access behind us to be able to get in and out. That's kind of been more my concern with all this. And then there have been, you know, some of the encroachments are very near to our fence already. So within 5 feet. So I think it's, you know, there's definitely some violations.
Does that conclude your?
Okay, that's all I want to add.
Thank you. Ms. Bennett.
Hi, my name is Carol Ann Bennett. I'm a lifelong resident of Tampa. I lived in a house for 20 years that had an alley behind it, and it wasn't used for anything. And a lot of the neighbors, you know, they kept it mowed. Everybody mowed the part that was behind their house. And many of the neighbors wanted to fence that in to be part of their yard. Back then it was chain link fences instead of these wooden privacy fences, but a lot of them wanted to do that. And not one of them ever did because they knew that that was an alley that belonged to the city, that it did not belong to them, and that they did not have the right to do that. And that if they did build a fence on part or all of the alley, that would be an illegal encroachment, and that they could be forced then to take it down. And so they didn't break the law, they followed the rules, and they did what they were supposed to do. This alley belongs to the city. If the city is going to give up ownership for it, it's only fair that half goes to one side and half goes to the other, which I think is what usually happens. And I'm a little mystified by the code enforcement saying, I go to the alley and there's a fence blocking my access, so I can't tell if there's encroachment. Well, that's the fence in and of itself is an encroachment. Like I said, we all knew that if we built our fence, we might have to tear it down. In and of itself, that's an encroachment. And Mr. Goods is correct. Several times I've heard testimony that they knew an application was coming, and so it was like, well, that'll solve the problem. And Ms. Point is correct too. Those ladies and the other homeowners, they don't know what to do. They just start at the beginning and they try to get help with the problem. And perhaps if someone had said, well, have you considered filing for a vacation? Then maybe they would have done it. But I don't understand how someone can do something illegal, and because they did it illegally, well, now you're going to benefit and the people who follow the rules are going to be punished. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I just think that the alley needs to be divided in half. And if people build things without permits, illegally on property that belong to the city, you know, then they have to suffer the consequences of it, just like everybody else does. I hope you vote no for this. Thank you.
Let me just ask, is there anyone else online or is there anyone else in chambers? Councilman Miranda.
There's so much smoke without fire that is getting dizzy in this room. I wanna create, in my own image, like Columbo would say, just one more question. Let's assume this is the alley. Let's assume this is the length of the alley. I have never seen an alley closed the whole way. I've seen an alley closed half the way, wherever it is. Did I hear Ms. Bennett say that the alley's gonna be closed the whole way? So what's the argument? The argument is that individuals, rightly or not even not doing, you may do something without knowing what the law is and build something encroaching into the alley, whether it's an inch or 3 feet in or whatever. So now an individual comes and moves to close the alley. That individual, in my knowledge, doesn't have the right to say the whole alley is mine, the whole 10 or 12 feet is mine, only half of it is yours. Am I correct so far? Or is the whole alley being closed to one individual?
Ron Wigington, Legal Department, just for historical perspective, maybe this will help understand. So originally, C.B. Shaw subdivision was created in 1907, and you can see here that these are the alleyways. This alleyway in particular is the subject alleyway. So originally, this alleyway was contained within the C.B. Shaw subdivision. However, in 1987 or thereabouts, Chicago Avenue subdivision was carved out of C.B. Shaw subdivision. Now, this is a new subdivision. And
What?
yes, sir, I'm sorry, it's a replat.
Replatted the
Yes, sir.
subdivision.
It's a this section was carved out of the original plat and is now a replat called Chicago Avenue subdivision. These are the points right here. These are the boundary points of the subdivision. The alleyway is south of the boundary line of that particular subdivision. So the city is not taking any position as to who owns, who has the fee of that alleyway, whether it's one side entirely or whether it splits down the middle.
I've never heard, when you close an alley, the two property owners on both sides get equal amount. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Usually, that is correct. However, when there's two subdivisions abutting each other and the alleyway is only contained within one subdivision, then there has been case law out there that says that only goes to one side because the original developer owned that whole parcel by himself at one time. And then theoretically, another developer owned the second parcel adjacent to it. So when the first developer includes that alleyway in his development, it doesn't necessarily split off to the adjacent developer's area.
So then,
Let me just, I know there's a lot of questions about who will end up owning the alley if it gets vacated. Really, the issue before you is whether the city wants to release its interest, its right-of-way interest in the alley. That's the issue. We don't get involved in who owns the underlying fee once the vacating occurs. And I just want to make that clear.
Mr. Massey, we know who you are.
Yeah, Mr.
before the
Morris
record.
Massey, Legal Department, I apologize.
I
Thank
agree
you.
with you, but this has been so
Yeah.
complicated from the beginning. When I saw that there was already individuals, rightly or wrongly, that had part of the alley blocked, I said to myself, what's the beef? They already have it. And then it got more complicated. So all the one I've been trusting with myself and saying, unless they're gonna take the whole alley, that's the only thing I can see. But what are you talking about, 5 feet?
It's
12.
It's hard to, again, we don't get involved in who ends up owning or controlling the alley after it gets vacated.
I'm not asking you to get involved.
Yeah.
But the citizens who live there in that alley, the ones that are encroaching, they're entitled to the other half, I guess. all the way to the
If
other
it gets
side property.
vacated, yes, sir, that at least.
Am I correct?
I'm sorry, if it gets vacated, there is no guarantee as to what, the city is taking no position as to what is going to happen if it gets vacated.
If it gets
If
vacated,
it
we're not
does
gonna,
not
we
get
can't tell you who
vacated,
has title to what.
the alley continues to exist, based on whether or not you meet the criteria that's set forth, for vacating. The point ultimately is, and Mr. Wigginton made this very clear at the last reading, the first reading, that the city does not take a position, nor does it involve itself in the civil case. And as Mr. Massey states, it's not for the city to determine or predict or suppose what the outcome is going to be.
Really, the ownership of the ownership of the underlying fee really should not be an issue that you all are grappling with. What you should be grappling with is whether the city should release its right-of-way interest in the alley. That's really what the focus of this hearing should be.
Councilman Goods.
Mr. Massey, and I'm glad you said that. So now, my mind is a little clearer now. So you're saying the city has no position in this alley. Only position we're going to say if we don't want it, and it's up to this council to say if we're going to release it. That correct, sir?
Correct.
All right. I'm done now.
Mr. Massey, before you leave.
Yes, sir.
I'm not asking you to give me a question, but I'm not an attorney at law. But I'm perceiving that no matter what this council does, no matter the decision it makes today, there's going to be lawsuits aplenty, one way or the other.
There could be a question about who has the underlying ownership, and that would be between a private lawsuit between the parties.
So right now, the decision for us to make is not who gets what, but just a vacation of that alley.
Correct, whether we want to release our right-of-way interest or not. Correct.
Let me ask you another question.
Yes, sir.
Code enforcement knocks on my door. Do I have to give them the right to go in my backyard?
No, sir.
No, sir, I do not. Do they have the right just to walk through my fence and go to the backyard?
No, sir.
That's why I've been screaming for drones. Code enforcement can't go into anybody's property. Thank you very much, Mr. Massey. Any other comments or questions? Councilwoman Hurtak?
I'm still going to argue that's not their property, and hasn't been. And what this basically looks like is that we're trying to, that the city messed up and that we're trying to solve it this way. And I don't agree with it.
Any other comments or questions? Close the hearing?
No, I start the rebuttal.
I'm sorry.
Let me just show you. This is what we're talking about. The white fence is the Chicago subdivision fence, and it's on elevated concrete blocks. There is only one out of all of those properties that has a gate that accesses going south. One. It has.
Mr. McLeany, I apologize. This brick wall right here, which way is the alleyway? Is that toward us?
The alleyway is on be to the right side over here.
To the right side. What is the I'm just asking a question if you don't mind, Council. What is the difference in elevation between the two properties?
I don't know you've got 3 rows of concrete block.
Thank you.
So, no one on the north side has tried to access this platted alley since the 80s. 1987 is when it was replatted. We prepared the title policy that I mentioned to you that says, just as the city attorney has pointed out, that the replat did not include the alley. The city staff has no objections to vacating this. And in terms of following the process, it followed the process. The city hired and paid for the surveyor to go out and determine exactly where that alley was before code enforcement moved forward and did anything. And it's the right of the property owner, that the potential property owners, to cure the problem. And so, in the matter of the cure and the code enforcement not taking any further action, it was to file for a vacating, which, as the city attorney and the city staff have told you, will cure the problem. The ownership of the alley, obviously that's a civil issue, and I don't know exactly how that's going to be resolved, but that's not what the request is. Every one of the departments, and I show this to you, and I've showed it to you last time, every one of the departments agreed that alley has of no public purpose anymore. None. There are easements reserved over it, so you can't build permanent structures over it, but the easements are being reserved for utilities and things like that. You know, I understand their frustration, but when they started the process with the complaint, this is how you go through the process to resolve the complaint. No one is jumping over, you know, a hurdle and somehow by sleight of hand not following the process. This is the process, and this is the way you cure it. Now, if the council chooses to not vacate it, then, you know, then we've got a different problem. But the city has already said they don't have any need for it. It doesn't serve a purpose. It does not provide access. It is obstructed. You know, I'll show you this. I mean, this is their report. There are structures and improvements in the alley. The staff has no objection to the request. I don't know how much more information we can give you. We've, you know, here's a photograph of the alley. And it shows you the townhomes across the north side, and this is basically where the alley is. You can't use it. It has nothing there to be utilized. And some of these obstructions have been there since the 80s. I can't help that. I don't, and it serves a redevelopment purpose because there's a project at the far west end of the alley for redevelopment. And by vacating that alley, the platted alley, you enable that project to move forward. One final comment is the city holds alleyways in trust. The ownership, the underlying ownership remains with the adjacent property. It doesn't transfer to the city. What we're asking you to do is to release your interest in that. And then it reverts back to the adjacent property. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know it's been a long issue regarding this project. But when you step back and you look at it, it's unused. There's no objections. The easements are being reserved. There is a grade differential between the adjacent properties on the north and the ones on the south. There's only one gate along that entire property, and it's the far eastern end of the alley where the neck is. It's way down here. So if somebody along in the middle had intended to use that for some purpose, it would have happened before now. We followed the process. There are no objections. We respectfully request that you vacate the alley.
Ms. Feely, I saw you on the screen.
I'm sorry, was she going to testify?
No.
Council, Abby Feely, Deputy Administrator, Development and Growth Management. I've been trying to get to you. I understand Mr. Michelini just concluded his rebuttal, so I don't want to necessarily muddy up this hearing any further.
Move to close.
Second.
We have a motion closed coming from Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor?
Aye.
What is the pleasure of council?
I'll go ahead and read the substitute.
Go ahead, Councilman Maniscalco.
I'm sorry, I do have a question on the substitute, Mr. Wigginton. If you can explain why this was the substitute between first and second reading?
Yes.
And just in a brief, if you can, what the basis for the substitution is?
Yes, so between first and second reading, it was discovered that the Stormwater Department no longer has any need for any easement whatsoever throughout the entire alleyway. It was also subsequently discovered that the Wastewater Department only needed an easement on the north-south portion of the alleyway and not the east-west, which really is the area in question between the Stroud Avenue residents and Chicago Avenue residents.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I have a substitute ordinance being presented for second reading and adoption. Ordinance of the City of Tampa, Florida, vacating, closing, discontinuing, and abandoning the alleyway located north of Stroud Avenue, south of Chicago, east of Carolina Avenue, and west of Moody Avenue within the plat of C.B. Shaw's subdivision in the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, Florida, as more fully described in Section 2 hereof, subject to certain covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and more particularly set forth herein, providing for enforcement and penalties for violations, providing for definitions, interpretations, and repealing conflicts, providing for severability, providing an effective date.
We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Vieira. Any further discussion? Place your votes and record.
Motion carried with Carlson, Hurtak, and Goose voting no.
Thank you, council.
We have, we have to, do those, this notice? Okay, no, those are already taken care of. You are correct. I would like that.
74,
That's what I was going to, 74, I wanted to reschedule. Thank you. Actually, 74 was a misnotice. It was its first misnotice, and they want to reschedule to February 16th.
so moved.
Second.
Have a motion made by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Can we hold reports until this evening?
Yes, but, well, it's all right. I can hold it to this evening. It's about the zoo I want to make a, it's all right. I'll hold it for this evening.
All right. We are recessed until 5:01. Receive and file. Motion to receive and file by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.